And now we are desperately waiting for our next session. And our chairpersons, co-chairpersons are here. The next session also will be moderated by Dr. Manoj Mathur sir. The chairperson, Dr. Pradeep Swarup sir. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Along with the co-chairperson, Dr. Nandakishore KB. Welcome all of you. And over to you, Dr. Manoj.
I welcome all the speakers in this session. We have labeled it Dakshin, involving all the 5 southern states. We have a set of 5 keynote speakers of all stalwarts from Dr. G.N. Rao, Dr. Bhujang Shetty, Dr. R.D. Ravindran, Dr. Amar Agarwal, and Dr. NSD Raju. So the first keynote speaker will be Dr. Gulapalli Rao. He needs no introduction. He is the founder chair of LVP-EI Hyderabad. He was a pioneer in making ophthalmology services widely available. He is an eminent academician. He was trained at Tufts University School of Medicine, Boston, and University of Rochester School of Medicine. He did commendable work on eye banking, corneal transplantation, community eye health, eye care policy and planning. He was the former Secretary General and Chair of the Board and CEO of IAPB and former President of AOI. He shall be delivering his keynote talk titled Eye Health and Eye Care in India. What next? Welcome, Dr. Rao. We know him as Nag. Dr. Nag, welcome. The second keynote speaker is Dr. K. Bhujang Shetty. He is the chairman, Narayana Netralaya, Bengaluru. He is a visionary with a passion for growth, foresight, and to anticipate future needs and enthusiasm to develop. He transformed Narayana Netralaya into the largest super specialty eye hospital in Karnataka, and he is an accomplished cataract and phacoemulsification surgeon. He shall be talking on the topic from a solo ophthalmologist to an institution, his journey. Next. Dr. R.D. Ravindran. I'm proud to introduce Dr. Ravindran as the founder of Arvind Eye Care System, Madurai. He is the Director, Information Technology and Systems. He was the Regional Co-Chair of IAPB, Director Quality of Arvind Eye Care System, and he is the mastermind behind the genesis of Oro Lab, ensuring provision of cost-effective eye care in India. He shall be giving his keynote talk, Patient-Oriented Approach is Critical to Building Practice. Dr. Amar Agarwal, Chairman and Managing Director, Dr. Agarwal Eye Hospitals. He introduced the concept of PhacoNet. He is among the past presidents of ISRS, and he is the Secretary General of IOL Implant IIRSI. He shall be speaking about mastering PDEK and pupilloplasty. Dr. NSD Raju is the Medical Director, Dr. NSD Raju's Eye Hospital and Research Center, Kochi. He is the pioneer in the field of IOL surgery. He arranged several eye camps and provided vision to all strata of the society, the man behind the introduction of peribulbar anesthesia. He shall be with us speaking about prevention of blindness caused by diabetes. Dr. M.S. Ravindra, he is the Chairman and Medical Director, Kartik Netralaya, Managing Trustee, Netra Jyoti Foundation. He is the Founder Director, Jyoti LASIK Vision Center, Bengaluru, former Honorary Medical Director, Bengaluru West Lions Eye Hospital and Cornea Grafting Center. He is the former President of Karnataka Ophthalmological Society, an innovator par excellence and efficient in creative instrument designing. He shall be speaking about why did I choose to persist with excelling in manual cataract surgery. Dr. Mohan Rajan, Chairman and Medical Director, Rajan Eye Care Hospital. He's a specialist in phacoemulsification and foldable IOLs and vitreous surgeries. He is very zealous to provide the benefits of total eye care in the field of community ophthalmology, and he shall be speaking about technology, techniques, innovations, and inventions in cataract surgery. Dr. Arul Mozi Varman, Medical Director, Uma Eye Clinic, Chennai, an astute and respectful clinician and an experienced instructor, a master of phaco with extensive experience. He has conducted over 150 phaco training programs in India and abroad. Customized cataract surgery, global emetropia shall be his talk for the day. Dr. G.R. Reddy, he is the chairman of G.R. Reddy Eye Care Center, Tadepalligudem in Andhra Pradesh. He introduced the practical guide to interpret visual fields. He is an authority on visual fields in India. He is a world-class quality eye care with well-trained team of specialists, staff, and high-end equipment in a remote place called Tadepalligudem in Andhra Pradesh. And he shall be talking about my learnings in the journey of understanding visual fields in glaucoma. Dr. Meena Chakravarti, consultant, Chakrabarti Eye Care Center, Trivandrum. She is the past president of Kerala Society of Ophthalmic Surgeons in November 2019, and she played an integral role in the development and progress of this institution. She shall be speaking today on an ode to the ILM, the role of the ILM in medical and surgical diseases of the retina. Dr. Jyotirmay Biswas, he is the director of uveitis and ophthalmic pathology, departments of Shankar Netralaya, Chennai. He gave a new face to the ophthalmic pathology by his expertise and his fellowship in the ophthalmic pathology from Doheny Eye Institute, University of Southern California, USA. He is a known international expert in the area of uveitis, and he shall be speaking about what research in uveitis, his journey, and the way forward. So with that galaxy of speakers, I have the pleasure to invite Dr. G.N. Rao to share his screen and speak on the keynote lecture, Eye Health and Eye Care in India, What Next? Welcome, Dr. Nag.
Thank you so much, Manoj. Members of the Executive Committee of the Telangana Ophthalmic Society, friends. It's a great pleasure to join you all this afternoon and share some of my views on what we probably will have to think of in terms of eye health and eye care, at least in the near future in our country. So let me share my screen with you now. I'd like to start with a video, something that captivated me some years ago when somebody shared this with me. If we want to change the shape of eye care in our country, this video clip has many messages on various aspects we have to work on as ophthalmologists in India. We as ophthalmologists of India, how do we work to make sure that no son in this country has to undertake a perilous journey to get the necessary health care, or in our case, eye care, for his mother? This video clip shows all the problems of accessibility, availability, and affordability of healthcare in our country. And it also shows two other important issues that we struggle all the time. The issues of quality and, very importantly, equity. This lady had the disadvantages of geographic, gender, and economic inequity. And how do we overcome all this and provide such individuals in all corners of our country a high quality eye care? This quote from J.K. Rowling during her Harvard graduate address in 2009 has really made an impact on me, and I keep using it repeatedly everywhere I speak. Your intelligence, your capacity for hard work, the education you have earned and received give you unique status and unique responsibilities. And that's true with all of us in this audience today. That is your privilege and your burden. If you choose to identify not only with the powerful, but with the powerless, if you retain the ability to imagine yourself into the lives of those who do not have your advantages, because the advantages that we have are not enjoyed by nearly 99% of our fellow countrymen. Remember that. We often lose that perspective. We are in the top 1% of India. Then it will not only be your proud families who celebrate your existence, but thousands and millions of people whose reality you have helped change. The most recent report from the vision loss expert group of the world has given these figures. A huge burden of blindness and vision impairment in our world. And to this, if we add all the other eye-related problems that people seek care for, nearly half the world's population requires some form of eye care all the time. And as you can see, almost everyone will need access to eye care services during their lifetime. And about 90% of all this is completely avoidable. That is either preventable or treatable with the already existing knowledge, techniques, and technology. And while we have launched many programs globally, nationally, statewide, the most recent being the Vision 2020, the Right to Sight program, while we have created framework for elimination of lots of problems, because of the increase in the size of the global population as well as the aging of the population, the absolute number of vision impaired kept on increasing. So if we today summarize the global situation, the prevalence is supposed to be decreasing. There's a big demographic shift, and eye care is not on the radar screen of the health departments in many countries. While the end of infectious blindness from such entities as onchocerciasis and trachoma appears feasible, we now have the challenges of chronic eye diseases, which are far more demanding. We need systems to be developed, and we also have to develop a campaign approach. We also have to learn to use technology to our advantage and develop innovative approaches to eye care. And of course, very little attention is paid to the people with irreversible vision loss because we hardly have any good quality rehabilitation services in our country. Whatever successes we have achieved so far happened because of very productive global partnerships, public-private partnerships, a good example being our own country, excellent translational work from the laboratory to the clinic to the community, innovative models of which India is the home of many, and focused approach on such problems as onco, trachoma, and cataract. According to this report on the World Health Organization, we still have 8.5 million blind and about 40 million with serious vision impairment. But of course, the study done within our own country has significant difference with this. The predominant causes, same. If you want to look at ongoing, it's cataract, refractive error, surgical complications, etc. And the newly recognized and emerging is constituted by the rest of the problems listed here. Those whom are females of lower socioeconomic group, living in rural areas with a significant geographic disparity, often pose the highest risks for blindness and vision impairment. Since we are talking about Telangana, this study done in the combined state of Andhra Pradesh in the late 90s shows these figures of the prevalence, magnitude, causes, etc. of both blindness and vision impairment, with cataract and uncorrected refractive error standing out. For the first time anywhere in the world, we have demonstrated that indeed uncorrected refractive error is a major problem. Until then, it was missed by everybody because the typical studies were done using best corrected visual acuity instead of presenting visual acuity. So we missed out on all the blindness and vision impairment of the uncorrected refractive errors. More recently, we have concluded the ongoing study on the incidence of blindness going back to the same locations in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. The first one looked at the prevalence and causes, and the phase 3 looked at among non-cases and progression among cases, the incidence. The first such study in the developing world, because there was no other longitudinal incidence studies till now other than this study. So some of the factors that came out that were surprising, while cataract and uncorrected refractive error was expected, we also found out retinitis pigmentosa is a leading cause of blindness and vision impairment in our population closer to home. And of course, the unique feature of this study is that covered all the age groups, unlike all other studies that were done in the country. And the only study from the developing world to have a 15-year data, the others being Beaver Dam and Blue Mountain in the US and Australia. Very high follow-up rate and one of the highest reported incidence of blindness and vision impairment. This shows in a million population, 10,000 to 15,000 new cases every year. So if you want to go forwards and do something about it and really see a nation in which no one is needlessly blind, and also where those with unavoidable vision loss can achieve their full potential, we have to have specific measures to close the gap. Can we close the gap by 2030? Because we did not achieve that by the year 2020. We need a completely new way of thinking. We have to develop increasingly across the country comprehensive eye care centers that would encompass prevention programs, promotion of eye health, diagnosis and treatment, and rehabilitation of irreversible blind. We have to continue to focus on cataract problems, as this problem remains our #1 problem of blindness. Uncorrected refractive error, easy to solve, but we have to find ways of doing it. In India, corneal blindness is an important cause. We have to address that. And the more complex retinal problems, glaucoma, and blindness in children. We also have to look at our areas of eye care education of all cadres of eye care professionals. The importance of technology and its place in eye health and eye care. We are only at the primitive stage of eye research in our country. We have to make advances in this area with proper investment, both in financially and human resources, and develop capacity, national research capacity for eye care. And advocacy with the people that matter, the policy makers, is very important. So the comprehensive delivery model should encompass all levels of care, from the community-based primary care at the bottom to institutes of excellence at the very top. In between, you have the center-based primary care with the vision centers, secondary centers in large villages and smaller towns, tertiary, and then advanced tertiary. A level that is appropriate for the problem, available to all people, affordable and accessible, that can handle all eye diseases at multiple levels with appropriate care. Until now, we have focused on cataract surgery, and the success was mainly because of large volumes performed by few centers and few people, a mission mode approach. We have now begun to think of a higher percentage of ophthalmologists in our country regularly performing a reasonable volume of surgery. That way we can tackle the problem. For uncorrected refractive errors, I believe we need 20,000 primary eye care vision centers or equivalent, and then a very robust, strong indigenous optical industry to cover 80 to 90% of that problem. In corneal blindness, we have to have 50 world-class eye banks, not any eye bank, world-class, supported by 500 hospital cornea retrieval programs in 500 of our major hospitals across the country, and a cornea service in every single medical college of the country to tackle the problem of corneal blindness of all shapes. Similarly, for the other complex problems, now in the realm of tertiary care, we have to invest in infrastructure, training at all levels, residency, fellowships, and continuing education of practicing ophthalmologists, so that we have more ophthalmologists involved in handling these problems. And we also see how we can cascade the care down to secondary and primary levels as much as possible if we were to deal with the large magnitude of the problem that we have. In all our medical colleges, we have to have subspecialty development for better care, better access to care, and better education to residents and others. So to truly create academic departments in our medical colleges. And district hospitals should be linked to medical colleges, and medical colleges should be given the responsibility of those departments. And primary health centers, in turn, should be linked to district hospitals. In education, more programs. Every medical college and a tertiary center should have education of much better quality with innovative approach. The goal should be any resident completing ophthalmology residency should not need a fellowship to practice comprehensive ophthalmology. Embracing technology for diagnostic tools, digital education and digital technology, telemedicine, etc., with advances like artificial intelligence incorporated in it to enhance care and research and enhance education. For research, we should all work towards creating a national eye research fund to promote research centers and to inculcate and create a culture of research in our medical colleges, to find a solution to our own problems and to offer solutions to the rest of the world, and intellectual capacity building in eye care in our country. In advocacy, continue the public-private partnerships with central and state governments, foundations, and philanthropists to keep the relevance of investment in eye care alive in all these groups so that we have access to more funding that will enable us to do more work. Ultimately, it's the combination of talent with technology together with tenderness that we could create doctors with good hands, good heads, and good hearts. Some years ago, McKinsey Global Institute came up with a new index called Empowerment Line. Those people who have access to all these basic necessities of living are above the empowerment line. And those who don't have access to all these are below the empowerment line. And unfortunately, more than 50% of our fellow countrymen fall below the empowerment line. So as we plan to create healthcare and eye care for everybody with a universal health system, we have to keep that in mind. And we also should align ourselves with the larger goals of Sustainable Development Goals of UN, of which India is a votary. Of the 17 goals, 8 are linked to eye care and eye health. Poverty, women and girls, improved eye health can increase household income and ensuring good health and mental health, etc., etc. So we also have to begin to think of these things as we move forwards. Atul Gawande in his book Better said there are 3 core requirements in medicine: diligence, to do right, and ingenuity. And I'm sure each one of us is capable of each of these, because he said medicine is to live a life of responsibility. So long as half the world goes without essential treatment, the fruits of centuries of medical science will be wasted. So we all have to work towards provision of universal basic health care to all our people. We have to make sure that we are not afflicted with poverty of ambition, but instead we develop that power of ambition, all of us in Indian ophthalmology. Then we can offer high quality eye care and eye health to every citizen of India. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dhiral, for your wonderful exposition about eye care in our country. What next? Dr. Swaroop or Dr. Nandkishore or anybody else, would you like to ask 1 or 2 questions? We can take that. Otherwise, I move on to the next speaker.
I just have one comment to pass. Thank you, Dr. Nag, for initiating this very new way of thinking to all of us. And your statement, rather your quote, that the ability to think of, initiate our thinking into people who are less fortunate than us, so that the whole world and many more celebrate our existence, should probably become the basic essence of every clinician's life. In this current day, I think we are more driven to be cultural or commercial ophthalmologists rather than ophthalmologists with a purpose. I think these statements are very, very stimulating, and we thank you for that, sir.
Can I have a 15 seconds?
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
A few years ago, I ran into a high court judge who was a good friend in one of the airports. He looked at me and said, "Dr. Rao, you are getting wealthier and wealthier each day," he said. And I was a little taken aback, and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Every morning when they get up, lakhs of people must be giving you blessings. What better wealth can you accumulate than that?" So that sent me thinking, and we all should think. We can accumulate millions of blessings, better wealth than anything else.
True. Correct. With due apologies to Dr. Bhujang Shetty, due to preoccupation, I would now like to invite Dr. Mohan Rajan to give his talk. And then after that, Dr. Bhujang Shetty will come in. So request Hallmark to set the timer at 15 minutes. Invite Dr. Mohan Rajan to speak on technology, techniques, innovations, and inventions in cataract surgery.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Manoj and Dr. Santosh and the Telangana Ophthalmic Society. Let me share my screen first. And you able to see my screen?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, sir.
It's always a pleasure to be in the Telangana Ophthalmic Society, in my opinion, the most vibrant society of the state in the entire country. Now, what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes is a combination of technology, technique, innovations, and inventions in cataract surgery, and what I call always the golden triangle. The sun is sitting on the old mindset of cataract surgery. We used to have patients who are about 80-year-old with a dense cataract, and the mindset is if you give whatever vision, you will fall at your feet. But new mindset is like a luxury consumer. He's like a plastic surgery patient. He wants good vision for distance, intermediate, near, and he wants the vision the very next day as well. So this is the old technology, 1 GB in 1991, which is replaced by a 1 GB, which you can just put it in your wallet as well. Newer technology in the machines, in the phaco machines as well, in the femto, and so many other things are also coming into play. The old machines and new machines. The old machines are very, very bulky. The newer machines are sleek and very sexy as well in the operation theater. The keys to the refractive cataract surgery is to increase the refractive accuracy, decrease the complications, choose the best quality visual IOLs, and also exceed the patient expectations, under promise and over deliver. Hard brown cataracts is a very, very common scenario in our country. 60% of the cataracts are grade 3 and above. Pupil is small and the posterior capsule is weak. These are all the challenges to the phaco surgeons as well. Brown cataracts, thin posterior capsule, increased incidence of corneal edema and postoperative corneal decompensation, increased incidence of PCR and nucleus drop as well. You can see this is a cataract. It's like a piece of granite inside the eye. And if you do this, divide and conquer and stop and chop in these cases, or the horizontal chop or whatever it is, the horizontal chop is not possible in this case, hard cataract, because because there's no cortical cushion. In horizontal chop, you go underneath the rexus and come from the periphery, or you can do the tangential chop. Again, with the tangential chop, unless you have a high myopia with a deep anterior chamber and a lesser hard cataract, maybe a softer cataract can go over to the tangential chop. So you can end up in a corneal burn because the corneal burn, as you know, the consequences of a corneal burn is irregular astigmatism, wound gaping, infection, and even endophthalmitis as well. This is a corneal edema. It may take a long time for the corneal edema to clear up, but the corneal edema is associated with increased incidence of prostaglandin release and also inflammatory cytokines in the eye, and increased incidence of cystoid macular edema as high as 25 to 30% as well. And again, a fibrin reaction, something like a TAS in the anterior segment. We have the cold phaco systems. The Stellar is the hyperpulse, the Bosch and Lomb, the Signature Pro, which is the gold standard, as far as the cold phaco, which is the White Star, the fusion fluidics, wherein we can switch over from the Venturi to the peristaltic, and the Ellipse system as well, the Infinity, the Alcon, the Ozil, or the Centurion with the active fluidics, TurboVit, Apasami. The Indian machines are also doing very well. This is a traditional ultrasound wherein you can see the longitudinal movement of the tip. This is the Ozil wherein the movement is going in the horizontal direction. And this is the Ellipse wherein there is a combination of the longitudinal as well as the horizontal. This is what we call the torsional phaco as well. This Ellipse power modulation, you can see how the power modulation in 1969 when Charles Kellman started this thing, it's called the fixed power. Now it is called the pulse power. The pulse power wherein there is an on and off time, the duty cycle. The duty cycle is nothing but the on plus off time divided by the on time, which is giving the amount of what is called the hyperpulse technology, which is very, very important. This is a simulation of the continuous mode. This is a simulation of the hyperpulse mode, wherein you can see here during the hyperpulse mode, the tip gets cooler, and also another important thing is there is an attraction of the nucleus into this thing, hyperfallibility also, which is again a very, very important part. So I have developed the chopper, which is called the Micro Mohan Rajan chopper, which is made by Appasamy Associates. I don't have any financial interest. The length of the chopper is 1.5, 1.75, 2 millimeter. 2 millimeter is used for the brown cataract, very sharp tip, no damage to the posterior capsule. You can see this 1.25 millimeter, which I don't use much now, the 1.5 millimeter, the 1.75 millimeter, and the 2 millimeter as well. The 1.75 millimeter, the 2 millimeter is the one which is commonly used. The 1.75 is very good for the brown cataracts as well. And you can see here the sharp chopper. Because of the sharp chopper, it works wonderfully well, opening up the posterior nuclear plate. Again, as I told you, the combination of Stellaris, that is the common technology and technique, the Stellaris, the Infinity or Centurion Signature Pro, the TurboVit or Centurion or whatever you are comfortable with. The technology is available. The technique is what is called the vertical chop, the sharp chopper. Of course, we have the viscoelastics which are available, the Yalon 5, the Disco Whisk, the Viscoat. Again, no financial interest. Post-operative day one, you can see the crystal clear, pristine wounds as well, crystal clear corneas as well. Just to find out this, certainly there is a quick chop express, where you can see the parameters on the Stellaris mission, how important it is to have the good rexes and by means of what you call the trypan blue. And you can see that once you do the trypan blue, the opening of the posterior nuclear plate is very, very important. Again, with the sharp chopper, you can just bury the tip and you can see the chopper works like a magic. You can open up the posterior nuclear plate, and once you open up the posterior nuclear plate, you can see the posterior capsule through and through, and that is the half battle won. You can see another patient with the brown cataract, the brunism cataract, what I call as the cataracta rubra. You can see here again the rexis is slightly bigger. We make a rexis slightly bigger, about 5.5 or 5.75 millimeter, because these cataracts are very, very big, and these are the parameters I use on a Stellaris mission. And this is again a black cataract, a cataract Niagara. Again, how important it is to do a trench and use this chopper, which makes life very, very easy and giving consistently clear corneas post-operatively. You can see here I'm trying to do the chopping and trying to do the chopping and opening up the posterior nuclear plate with lateral separation as well. And the chopper, because it's long and sharp chopper, it works like magic and very little lateral rectus forces. You can see here, this is a post-operative picture of clear corneas. And of course, the what you call the femtocataract, the brown cataract, this thing makes very, very easy, life easy, because it is already pre-cut. The capsular rexis is done, whichever size you want. The amount of phaco energy which is used is very, very less in the femtocataract or the catalyst laser. Again, you can see here, this is Argentina flag sign. This Argentina flag sign can occur in intumescent cataracts, as you know, because the interlenticular pressure is very, very high. Once you touch the cataract and see, this Argentina flag sign can be dangerous because this rexis can extend across the equator into the posterior capsule and can lose the nucleus into this thing. To overcome this, you can use the femtocataract, but unfortunately, it's a very costly technology. Not everybody can have it, but this is a very, very good system. Or you can have the Zepto, wherein you can use the Zepto. You can open up the capsular rexis without any problem. And this is an electrical, this is a nitinol ring which is introduced into the antechamber. This is a little invasive technique, unlike the femtocataract as well. Or you can use what is called as 27 gauge needle and aspirate the front compartment. If you aspirate the front compartment, what happens is the interlenticular pressure comes down, and because the interlenticular pressure comes down, the rexis becomes very, very easy, as you can see in this particular picture. Again, you can see here another patient with a 30 gauge needle, an intumescent cataract, and trying to aspirate the what you call the cortex in front of the underneath by making a small, very small micro incision with the needle, and then going ahead with this thing.
This animation shows again, the increased intralenticular pressure.
You can see here there is a pressure in front of underneath the anterior capsule, the pressure underneath in front of the posterior capsule. The nucleus is also very bulky, and there is a positive vitreous pressure as well. And that is why I developed what is called the punchorexis. The punchorexis is very, very easy technique, wherein you go with the phaco needle, either a 0 degree or a 15 degree, and go bevel down and punch the anterior capsule. As you punch the anterior capsule, you also give some amount of phaco power. What happens is that debulks the nucleus as well, and that is again very, very important for you to understand this whole ball game. Once you do that, 200% of the time you will not have any Argentina flag sign, and makes very, very life easy. You can see here again, these are the parameters they use for the puncture axis. You can use any machine, but don't use Kelman tip. Don't use the Kelman tip or the curved tips. Again, very, very important. Again, you can see these are the NHNT cataracts. What are these NHNT cataracts? These are neither here nor there cataracts. These are cataracts which make your life very, very difficult, because these cataracts don't suck, don't cut, and don't crack, and don't chop as well, and is very, very difficult for the thing. What I do is make a deep trench all the way down and try to separate the cataract into two halves, and then go ahead with this thing. Again, a posterior polar cataract, again, this optic capture is something which is very, very important, because in posterior polar cataract, there are the posterior capsule is opened up, and you can see there is it's like two pillars on the posterior capsule, and this optic capture makes life very easy, wherein you put the lens, the multi-piece lens in the sulcus, the haptic is in the sulcus, and do the optic capture, and this makes sure that the lens is well centered, long-term centration is there, and also the preventing the UGH syndrome. The endpoint is the ovalization of the anterior capsular margin or the capsular axis margin. Very, very important. This is the post-operative picture. Again, anterior vitrectomy, you can go through the pars plana by putting a trocar and cannula, which again, very, very easy, more scientific also. Remove less amount of vitreous, there's no traction on the vitreous base. And again, very, very important that you need to be well versed with your trocar and cannula, and that makes very, very life easy. Just to show you the sweep wash technique, wherein I always use the coaxial irrigation aspiration. You can see here the sweep wash technique, wherein I go underneath, start underneath from the subincisional, and go one this thing clockwise, and then another one which is anti-clockwise, and that is the end of the cortical aspiration. You can see here again, this is a sweep wash technique again, and just to show you how it is important to do this, starting again in the subincisional area, because when the subincisional area, when the bag is open, if you remove the cortex from the subincisional area, it makes life very, very easy, because otherwise you'll struggle at the end of this thing when the bag is starting to collapse. So you can go clockwise first, and can see here how I'm doing that. And always making sure I always use a curved tip. You can use a bimanual tip as well, and there's also the bimanual IA as well, and this makes very easy. Triangular flaps or glued IOL, which I have described, because many of us are used to what you call the trabeculectomy flaps and triangular flaps. You can use the triangular flaps or glued IOL instead of doing a rectangular flap, which again is, or you can do flapless as well. Just put a groove there, and you can do a flapless glued IOL, which again very, very easy. This is a Rajanai surgical drape, which is again very thing, wherein just one important surgical drape is made up of a material called crepe, and which also absorbs the water. And you can see here how important it is to cover the eyelashes during the surgery, and that is what is important. Ask the patient to open the lid, how important to cover. The drape is a slightly bigger drape, which covers the up to the chest of this thing. This is the double hole drape which you are described, which is claustrophobia. For claustrophobia is more common than what you can imagine. You can this is just to show you the double hole drape. The double hole drape wherein both the eyes are completely open. If both eyes are completely open, the patient is very, very comfortable. The patient, the drape is also slightly smaller, so that the patient can see this thing. Because the claustrophobia patients can make their life very, very difficult for you. So while the left eye is getting operated, you can see through the right eye as well, and the claustrophobia is taken care. Again, this is the anterior chamber maintainer, which I've devised. It's a needle anterior chamber maintainer. You can see this is a 23 gauge needle, which we can just go through. It snugly fits into the anterior chamber. Again, to show you in an SICS or the Blumenthal technique, the anterior chamber maintainer, which is about 22 or 23 gauge needle, which is made by the Appaswamy Associates company. Just to show you patient syndrome, this is my last slide, pulmonary hypertension, cardiomyopathy, how innovation is very, very important. Aggressive, violent psychosis, bilateral dense cataract. GA was not possible, LA was not possible. Our team of anesthetists suggested surgery under short GA with midazolam and fentanyl, gave us only 5 to 7 minutes of surgery. So what I did was, I did a bilateral simultaneous cataract surgery. You can see here by bilateral simultaneous cataract surgeons. This is the first time in the world it's been done, and it's been documented as well. You can see here, this is a same patient under midazolam. Within 4 to 5 minutes, we are able to finish. I was operating the left eye of the patient from the superior quadrant on the you can see here with the Zeiss with the Lumira microscope, the Zeiss 1/4 microscope. My colleague Dr. Rajguru was operating from the side on the right side. So simultaneous bilateral cataract surgery, which is the first time in the world, which is again by bilateral simultaneous cataract surgeons. So bilateral simultaneous cataract surgery is possible. Many patients are doing, many surgeons are doing that, but not by the bilateral simultaneous cataract surgeons at the same time. And this is probably one of this thing. And the patient was very happy. You can see here, very comfortably we did the surgery. Only thing is the Zeiss 1/4 microscope need to be a very smaller microscope, because that has to go into the space, because the very space is very, very limited. So this is just to show you that the surgery is completed very successfully. And you can see here at the end of the surgery, the patient is also very happy. And this is the entire team. We did a mock drill about 1 week prior to surgery for this patient. And this is the first time in the world wherein you can see here that the bilateral simultaneous cataract surgery by bilateral simultaneous cataract surgeons is being done, regaining good vision in this mentally retarded patient. So cataract surgery today has become easy, effective, enjoyable experience for both the patient as well as for the surgeon. Again, thank you, TOS, for this wonderful opportunity. And sorry to for the other speakers, because I have a program with the Governor of Tamil Nadu for the 26th anniversary function of Rajan Care. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan Rajan, for that wonderful exposition. So it is my pleasure now to invite Dr. Bhujang Shetty, who shall be speaking on the topic from a solo ophthalmologist to an institution. He has really built himself up. He started his practice as a solo practitioner, and now he is the head of an institution, a huge institution. Welcome, Dr. Bhujang Shetty. Please share your screen.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Manoj, for that generous introduction. And I also want to thank Dr. Santosh Hanawar and his team for having given me this opportunity. He was very particular, Santosh, that I speak on my journey and my lessons. Well, my journey started way back in December 1982, right away after my MS, 3 months after my MS, as a one-man army in a 2-room clinic in Srirampuram, Bangalore. Well, at that time, I really didn't have too much of help. My wife assisted me in the theater, and we managed things in this fashion. Well, really, it was quite difficult at that time, because I never had a budget, never had a game plan, never had a godfather. But I did have a dream. They say great dreams of great dreamers are never fulfilled, but always transcended. And, well, I had 3 role models. One, Dr. Badrinath. As you all know that I have our Netralaya is borrowed from him. I met him once and I told him, sir, this is what I want to do. He said, well, that's a Sanskrit name. Go ahead, and wish you all the best. Very grateful to him. And another role model is right here. Extremely happy that he's here. We've all heard him, a true visionary. And he's the one who showed us all that, we could treat the underprivileged by treating the well-to-do people, so that both get equally good healthcare. And of course, this doctor, who everybody knows, told us and taught us that how we can build institutes through community service. Well, I always thought that the right mix of art and science leads on to luck and fortune. we all know that, it's just science is not enough to succeed in the marketplace. We all have all our ranked students who have excelled in college, but sometimes when they start practice, they don't get that same the exalted the place in the marketplace, because maybe they are missing out on the art of practice, or what's called soft skills. And I feel soft skills are equally important as far as private practice is concerned. And of course, most important aspect of any person's success is their attitude. No wonder they say your attitude will determine your altitude. So we need to see what our attitude towards our patient is, what our attitude towards our colleagues, our attitudes towards our work, and also attitude towards our life itself. Well, as far as patients are concerned, I've always felt that the most important thing that we need to do is make our practice patient-centric. As they say in the defense, the country first, always and every time. We as doctors must put our patients first, always and every time. And nothing should come above the patient. And the patient experience, their satisfaction is, I feel, most important, because we may not be able to cure them all. We may not be able to, fully cure them of their diseases, but definitely we can send them back satisfied. A happy and a satisfied patient becomes your brand ambassador. And once you have such brand ambassadors, you see hundreds of them daily. And if you could add hundreds of brand ambassadors to your practice every day, you don't need a marketing team. That's what I keep telling, that make your patients your brand ambassadors, and you'll never, ever require a marketing team. The relationship between a patient and a doctor, I feel, should be like that of a bee and a flower. It must be gentle, it must be transparent, it must be mutually beneficial. Well, what's the attitude towards our colleagues? We should see them as friends and not foes. The easiest thing is to criticize. That's exactly what we should never do. You could never grow tall by cutting somebody else's feet. And every time a patient sits in your office, your chamber, coming for a second opinion after not so happy surgery at another place, what would be your response? That's most important. And I always tell my friends and colleagues that, well, you should respond to that patient. You need not hide anything, but you should respond to the patient as if you had done the surgery. How would you respond when such questions are asked, and what would be your response if you had done the surgery? If you could do that, you'll be doing some good service to your colleague. And if you go to see today, the cases in these consumer courts are increasing, and invariably it's due to some harsh comment made by a colleague that has caused this or encouraged this patient to go to the courts. Well, and what is our attitude towards work? We must make our work like play. I'm sure you know the difference between work and play. Work is what you have to do, play is what you want to do. You have to find, as they say, joy in the journey. The work itself must give you the joy, not the results so much. The very fact that you see patients and you treat them, that must give you the joy. Well, there is a story of a man who was passing by and saw three stonecutters. I'm sure you've all heard about this story. And he asked each one of them what they were doing. The first stonecutter said, well, I'm cutting stones. The second one said, I am making a living. And the third one said, I am building a temple. All the three of them were doing the same job, but their perspective was totally different. So we should ask ourselves, what exactly do we go out every morning to the hospital to make a living, to see a patient, or to restore vision to the blind, or give light to people who come to you with so much of pain and misery. If you always consider yourself that you are doing this kind of work, your output will be just amazing. Well, last, of course, our attitude towards life itself. Of course, we should never let success go to our head or take failure to our heart, because success and failures are two sides of the same coin. We should always be positive and think of the good things that we enjoy in life. But unfortunately, most of the time, we are focusing either on something that has gone wrong yesterday, or we are anxious about the future. So I always feel that if you can think big and think positive and dream big, anything is achievable. Well, as I told you, I started my practice because I never had any mission or a vision. And it was for my roti, kapda or makan. And when that was fulfilled, then I had to take a call. Do I continue as I am, single-handed, or do I form a team? Then I realized that if I continue as I am doing, I'll be limited by my two little hands. But if you could get some, other good team, that we could have thousands of hands doing great work. So we decided to go in for a team. And I'm extremely happy that we have a fantastic team. And people do ask me, how do you retain these guys? Well, we have to, consider them as colleagues and not assistants, give them both cash and credit, let them grow. As they grow, you also grow. The institute grows. So much so that, everybody, it's a win-win situation. And of course, if you pay peanuts, you only get monkeys. That's what they say. So you need to give them both cash and credit. Well, ethics, they say, lies in the eyes of the beholder, and every walk of life has got its own ethics. We should know what is our Lakshman Rekha and what we cannot cross as doctors. I keep repeating this story. What one patient told me the other day, doctor, it is no more Vaidyo Narayano Hari, but it has become Vaidyo Narayano Vari. I was shocked and I asked him, why do you say this? He says, we patients these days feel that doctors are more interested in our pockets than our problems. That means today patients have started suspecting our motive. And when they start suspecting our motive, I think that is the last straw. No wonder we see so much of, atrocities, so many cases against doctors. We need, of course, I don't blame doctors for everything, but we need to introspect. They need two hands to clap, they say. So let's introspect and see if we are on the right track and where we have gone wrong. A bird sitting on a branch is quite happy and feels safe, not because it trusts the branch, but it has faith more in its wings. Even if the branch breaks, it doesn't care. So also as doctors, we should have faith in ourselves. If you continuously depend on other doctors to refer cases and the practice of kickbacks and all this, it is going to make you weaker and weaker. We should never trust the branch because we do not know when the branch will break. So always develop your own strength in your wings so that you can have your own practice without depending too much on anybody else. And Dr. Rao just mentioned this. I believe in this, that when you actually treat a rich patient, he not only demands his pound of flesh, but also he really makes your life sometimes miserable. So many questions, so many queries, even before surgery. Whereas if you ever treat a poor patient for some concession or sometimes free, this person will worship you, will bless you. And as Rao said, I truly believe that blessings are more important than even wealth. That is the biggest wealth that we can ever have, because these blessings are the ones that will protect us when we get caught in some crossfire. And I always feel that money, I don't say money is not important, but when you make money most important, then problem starts. Let money be secondary to your patient. When you make it patient-centric, and patient being the most important person there, then automatically money, fame, and your power, everything will chase you. It will follow you. You do not chase these things. That's my true belief. As I say, what Henry Ford has said, a business that makes nothing but money is poor business. Yeah, I always thought, everybody thinks that you need to be a trust hospital to do charity. It's not necessary. We see so many private individuals doing so much of charity. And as I said, if you use that money, because we have received so much from society, we need to give it all back at some time, or at least some amount, so that there is always, as I say, more happiness in giving than receiving. And at the end of the day, a clear conscience is the softest pillow, they say. We may fool the world, but we actually know where we stand. We cannot fool ourselves. So this is absolutely important. If you want to get a good sleep, you need to have a clear conscience. For that, you need to be true to yourself. And for me, success is just not wealth, a car or a bungalow. It also means good health, a happy and a fulfilling relationship, and a sense of overall well-being. We need to have a true work-life balance. There's no point in getting 100% in maths and failing in all subjects. If you're extremely successful and you may be the country's #1 or internationally famous eye surgeon, but if you have neglected your family, if you have neglected your health, you would really not truly be successful. So we need to have a good work-life balance. And of course, this is my last but one slide. I always look up to her. She's the one who said that there is more happiness in giving than in receiving. And everything that I wear, that I eat, that I enjoy is somebody else's contribution. We should ask ourselves, what is our contribution to society? So I keep telling that 3 sets of people can never be repaid. One, our parents. However much you may do for them, you could never imagine what they did for you. You'll know that, of course, if you are a father yourself, how much you love, how much trouble you take over your children. So one thing I can advise you, if you are blessed to serve your parents, never ever neglect them. Grab that opportunity with both your hands, so that at least you can pay back to some extent to what they did for you. And the next set of people are our teachers. We are all what we are because of our teachers. And that we should never ever forget, and that respect and that honor that we need to give them, we definitely need. That's why it is said, why Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So Guru is like God. I think we need to really keep him there and worship him and give him that respect. And third entity that you could never pay back is the society. Well, everything that we are today, everything I have received is from the society. Every single thing that we have received is from the society. Even we have honed our skills, especially on the poor of this nation. Don't forget that. And after that, when we become successful, what is it that you're going to give back to that poor section of the society? I think we should all think about this and see whatever little we can do. Not saying that we can do that 100% of the time. And the models that L.V. Prasad, that Shankar Netralaya and Arvind have set for us, we should all look up to them and see, at least we may not be able to do as much as what they have done, but follow their footsteps and see what we can do as individuals. Well, with this, I would like to end and thank the Telangana Ophthalmic Society, Dr. Santosh and his team for having given me this opportunity. Good evening to all.
Thank you, Dr. Bhujan Shetty, for that wonderful, wonderful and very, very inspirational address for all of us to emulate in our careers, especially the youngsters. You are a story, you are a dream story for all of them. So thank you very much. If anybody want to comment anything.
Yes, Dr. Bhujan Shetty, Dr. NST Raju.
Yes, Dr. Raju.
How are you? Keeping fine?
Fine, sir. Thank you.
See, I really enjoyed your address, and you really did give us a splendid account of the principles and the wise lessons you have learned from your own life experience. That's one thing I really appreciate it. The second thing is about the way we behave. You said when there are occasions of litigations against a doctor, most of the time you are right. It is because of some sort of inadvertent or a purposeful dirty comment from one of our colleagues. As you said, that is usually the case, but not always. What do you think when you are faced with you are an expert surgeon? You may not have complications, but there are no surgeons who do not end up with some complications sometimes somewhere. Then how do you communicate? There is an art of communication. So the doctors should be very familiar with the art of communication. That makes a lot of difference. The way you communicate with the patient, that something wrong has happened. I know of many doctors who don't divulge that he had a lens drop or capsular rupture or whatever thing, but it does happen. They don't tell the patient, and if the patient end up in any problem afterwards, with a very poor surgical outcome, then you are in for trouble. Then I think that we are also partly responsible for litigations. What do you think? And how do you manage that situation in case you are faced with such a situation?
Yeah, we all have. I mean, they say he who never climbed never fell. That means if you have really done a number of surgeries, you would have got into trouble. You would have had some, the nucleus drop or whatever. But what I say is that we need to be totally transparent from the go, from same day, the same minute. You need to discuss, be very, very transparent, as you mentioned, with the patient. Patients will tolerate. They know that we are not gods. They know that something can go wrong. Accidents do happen. But the moment the patient finds out that you are trying to hide something, the moment the patient finds out that you're not true, you are not told the truth, then he gets very annoyed. If you are upfront, if you tell them, look, I'm sorry, this accident has taken place. And also, of course, don't wash your hands after that. You should help them to see what best next. If you've got the facility in your institute to handle that case, go ahead and you tell them, well, we are going to do this thing, and another surgeon will handle this. And you explain to them how exactly it's done. Or in case you're a single practitioner, you do not have it, you help the patient to get another competent surgeon. You can talk to your colleague, you talk to somebody and tell them, look, he's my friend, he'll sort this out, and I've spoken to him. Make things easy for the patient. Don't leave him high and dry.
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
Don't just see that, help him as much as possible. So the patient never actually bothers, what happened. Patient, looks at what you do after that has happened. How you behave. So
that's
if
important.
you that you're always with him, you're always there to support, and you've been very transparent, I'm sure they'll forgive you. And the greatest moment for me is that one of my patients who was operated in those days had an end off, lost that eye. And believe you me, he came back to me for the next time. That I feel is the biggest trust a patient can have. Having lost one eye, under treatment, comes back for the precious eye to the same surgeon. I mean, that is something that we should, if the patient can have that kind of confidence, I think that you have made it.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Bhujang Shetty. Our next speaker is Dr. R.D. Ravindran. He will be speaking upon the topic patient-oriented approach is critical for building practice. Dr. R.D. Ravindran, please.
Thank you. Can you see the screen? Just a minute. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Are you able to see the?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, we are able to see.
Okay, then thank you. I mean, first of all, thanks to Dr. Manoj, Dr. Sandosh, and the Telangana Ophthalmic Society for this opportunity to speak on this topic. It's something we need to ingrain into the DNA of our practice. I mean, this is what Dr. Bhujang Shetty talked about. The patient-oriented approach is very critical to building anyone's practice. So whenever we normally start a practice, we normally look at the surgeon or good ophthalmologist normally look for a location which has got a good visibility to the patients or to the public. They try to put enough resources into creating a state-of-the-art infrastructures. Today, aesthetics is also equally important because that's one of the expectations of the patient. And if you want to practice evidence-based medicine, today we also need state-of-the-art equipment. In addition to qualifying ourselves well, we also need to have skilled personnel if you want to deliver the best practice. But any practitioner or any organization has only one challenge in building their practice in front of them, which is that challenge is there year after year, which is about growing the volume of the patients. And growing the volume of the patients is very important because your expenses are going to grow every year. And you may not be able to just cover that by increasing the cost to the patient. So only if you are able to grow the volume of the patient, you will be able to remain sustainable. And again, growing the volume, you need to do it in a very sustainable process. In the sense, just doing a digital marketing, we know that it's very powerful. We'll be able to get the patients through advertisement, but it's not going to sustain for a very long time if you're not able to deliver what you speak, what you say, you'll deliver. If you're not able to keep it up, you may not be able to get that volume of patients sustainably. So if you are able to build the volume, you will have the financial viability, you will be able to pay back the loan, or you will have enough cash for expansion. And again, having the volume also helps challenges the team, your team, and you are able to have a work efficiency and able to do the work very effectively. And again, building the volume also leads to visibility of the organization, and it helps in long-term sustainability. So the building volumes is very important. We cannot just stay away with what we saw this year, the volume, but we need to keep adding the volume year after year. Now, how do you build the volumes? So this is something Dr. Bhujang Shetty talked about. It's all about word of mouth. So when we start a new hospital, even when we have an eye camp, we ask the patients, how did they know about the hospital? How did they know that it's a new hospital? How did you come? Nearly 70% of the patients come based on the recommendation given by the other patients. So only if you have a positive experience of the previous patient, the patients will come. So leveraging the word of mouth becomes very, very important if you want to build the practice, which is again, as Dr. Bhujang Shetty said, if you are going to build the brand ambassadors for you, the patient brand ambassadors, if you have, then your practice is going to grow. And we need to understand, how do we leverage, what is this word of mouth? How do we leverage it? Usually we have to understand the patient's expectations. The patients really look for a good clinical quality. They look at the medical care, the nursing care, the outcomes, but they are not really satisfied with that. They also look at the service quality. They look at your pricing, the transparency, the ambience and facilities you provide. And it's also a differentiator of where they seek the services. And again, we have to understand both the clinical expectations regarding the clinical quality as well as the service quality constantly change as the patients are aware of the new technologies and what is possible, what is the best outcomes they'll be able to get. So it's always good to understand this quality pyramid that has been proposed by the Institute of Medicine. It talks about 6 aspects of quality, which is patient safety, patient centeredness, efficiency, effectiveness, timeliness, and equity. I'm just sharing this quality pyramid because whatever you want to build, it has to be built on the patient safety, which is about not doing the harm, treating the correct patient, the correct site, the correct treatment. Because we all know that ophthalmology has the highest number of errors. Ophthalmology and orthopedics have the highest number of errors where we operate on the wrong site or probably we provide a wrong treatment, because every treatment today has got multiple procedures. If you take cataract surgery, we have small incision surgery, we have phacoemulsification, we have micro incision phacoemulsification, we have femtosecond laser, in addition to at least about 10, 12 different types of IOLs coming at different powers. So making sure that we don't make any error is very important, and having a safe facility is also equally important. So only on that you can build a patient-centered approach. The patient-centered approach is about providing care that is respectful of and responsive to individual patient, taking into their account the preferences, needs, and the values, ensuring that the patient values guide all our clinical decisions, not the interest of the staff. So I'll just go through a few of them. One is, how do we create access for the patient care? So, I mean, that's very important. If you are not going to create the access, it's going to build the practice. So based on that, our hospital is open from morning 7:30 to 6. And we also have to make sure that how do you take care of the vulnerable patients. So making available the adequate number of wheelchairs is very important, or somebody to guide them becomes very important. And those who need any emergency care should be given priority, and ensuring that the patients are also taken care on the same day is also important. And here comes, the question of appointment. So as a policy, as we would like to ensure that the patients, whoever comes to us, are taken care of the same day, we avoid appointments unless really requested by the patient over the phone. And we do it on a day convenient to the patient, not convenient to us. And similarly, to a large extent, we try to schedule our review visits as appointments. But at the same time, we take into account the access issues the patients have. And based on their interest, we fix the appointment dates. There are 2 things that are very important. One is, how do we minimize the cost of the treatment? So whenever we look at the cost of the treatment, only look at what we charge the patients. But to the patient, they look at the total cost, how much it costs them. So one of the way you can minimize the cost is how do we ensure all activities, all investigations and the treatment are done on the same day or the same visit? Because not the traveling back and forth really is very expensive. So one way to minimize the cost of the treatment is taking care of everything on the same visit is one strategy. And again, the relying more on the clinical diagnosis than on many investigation. Even when we do the investigations, I think we should need to keep it minimal, and evidence-based investigation should be the way to go. And again, the transparent pricing is very important. And here, I think if you talk about package of services, whatever services you offer, you give it as a package. You price it as a package, which means when you say cataract surgery is going to cost you this much, any absorbing any unforeseen expenditure should be part of your policy. That should not be charged to the patient. So any readmission or resurgery, I think it should be covered. I think you, as a policy, if you make it that you're not going to charge a patient, that is going to help you build your practice. And again, we all know about enabling informed decision making, making sure that the patients have information brochures, displaying the educational materials. And in addition to direct patient counseling, involving the patients and the relatives also, the patient's friends also in decision making is important. And in the true spirit, in addition to making that informed decision, it's getting an informed consent is also very important. Especially if the visual prognosis is going to be very poor, we need to really make the patients understand. And it's also important to get the consent for even for smaller procedures like the suture removal, where there is also can be some complications, like even sometimes after the suture removal, we have seen patients coming back with endophthalmitis. So ensuring the patients understand the procedures and the risk benefits involved and giving the consent is very important. And when the patients come for a treatment or for surgery or for a regular examination, maintaining the dignity and being responsive to the patient needs is very important. So when the patient is there, we have to train our staff to be present with the patient, listen to the patient. And today we also have patients, with a different type of other diseases. They may be HIV positive, they may be hepatitis B positive, but labeling any patients based on their other diseases or association of any other diseases should not be there. Any kind of discrimination should not be there. And prioritizing and extending help to vulnerable patients is also very important. And we also should try our best to minimize the waiting time. And if there is a delay, I think we need to keep the patients informed. As much as we do counseling for the patients who need surgery or any treatment, I think we also need to do the counseling for the post-operative follow-up and also for a regular follow-up. Some of the patients like advanced glaucoma or they have a PDR, they have got the laser and all done, but it's again coming back follow-up is very important. Here again, having information brochures. We also sometimes, some of the things where it's very important, we make sure that there's a signed communication is given to the patient both by the doctors and by our counselors. So intensive follow-up of any patients who are at risk of losing vision without treatment, I think we have to make sure that they come back. And we need to call these patients in case they don't come back for follow-up. And ensuring some of the basic amenities, whatever is needed, should be available in your facility. That's very, very important, including making sure availability of hygienic food at appropriate, at a nominal cost is also will be very much appreciated by the patient. So this is something we talked about, Dr. Bhujang Shetty. I mean, patient is always correct. When the patient's point of view is very important, we have to understand, sometimes they are complaining, we have to understand what they are trying to convey, what is their understanding from which they are complaining. We should never argue with the patient when they complain, because when you start arguing, you are going to use disrespectful phrases and expressions. So one way to handle difficult patients is escalate to the next level when one cannot handle the complaint. And even sometimes the patients may not be very rude, but they may not sound very happy with our explanations. So in such cases, when the patient is not satisfied again with our explanations, again, it is better you take it to the next level. So, I mean, our staff need to really understand the patient is always correct and we need to respond to them in that way. And again, getting a feedback is very important. Getting the feedback, it can be a very passive way or it can be active feedback. The passive feedback is one where you keep some registers or complaint registers, suggestion notebooks where the patients can write. I mean, that's not going to be actively done. Not everybody is going to come and write a complaint or a suggestion there. But even here, if you write, if there is a complaint or suggestion, if you write down what is a activity, what is a action you have taken, document it in that same notebook. If somebody sees it, and they may be encouraged to give their suggestions or complaints because they know that it is going to be acted upon. But what is important is actively reaching out to patients to get their suggestions, to get their complaints is very important. So in Aravind, we have a patient survey. We do it on a regular basis, on a daily basis. We cover all kinds of patients, whether they're outpatients or inpatients, whether they come to our hospital or a camp or a vision center or a city center, whether they bought medicine or a class. So the sample size varies from 1% to 8%. Nearly about 7,000, 8,000 patients are surveyed every month in Madurai. We look at the various aspects, right from the registration, doctor's care, nursing care, the waiting time, ease of navigation, what is the cost, amenities. And we also try to get what is their overall satisfaction. So this is done either using a paper records, or we also use an electronic mode, a tab. And the tab also, they'll be able to enter all the data. So there are few people who will be around in the outpatient department to get this thing. And we also have a call center. Today we started with 3 people. Now we have about 12 people. They call the patients who come to our vision centers, community centers, and maybe secondary centers where we cannot have this team. They call a certain number of people and get their feedback and enter into the system. And so this is one of the feedback that is given back to our vision centers. There are about close to about 20 vision centers. We get the responses, which varies from excellence, good, average, and share it with them. And if there's a consistently somewhere it is very low, then we look at the cause and try to correct it. And again, we try to quantify the responses from the patient and make it into a score, and we share it with the particular department, whether cornea, glaucoma. I mean, everybody, this sheet, they'll be able, all of them able to see it. They'll also be able to track what is the performance on a monthly basis from January to the year end. So some of them, some areas you'll be able to see that they also make improvement. This is based on certain science, and you'll be able to quantify each of these. The first 4 questions are for the doctor's care, then it is for nursing care. And there is a way converting the excellence into a particular score, good into a particular score, then we add it and take an average. And that is how it relates to the score we have shown here on this graph. We also get a lot of qualitative data. There are a lot of open comments. This again is aggregated and shared with the particular department. In addition to getting this feedback, we also have what is called focused group patient discussions. So we have a department, we have about 7 or 8 people. They have a small meeting with the patients, at least lasting for about 30-40 minutes, along with some of the staff. They have a set of questions which are also recorded. And these recorded messages, they are both good and maybe harsh, maybe very critical. This is also shared with the patients. So these are all audio records which we can share with the particular department. Recently, we also have gone to collect the information through an SMS. So we send an SMS. The patients, if they're happy with our services, they give a missed call to one number. If they're not happy, then they give a missed call to another number. So here we get close to about 4%. This message goes to everyone who comes to the hospital. Getting 4% responses really good. We really understand. So you capture all the complaints, suggestions, and then aggregate them, and you forward it to the target department. We are not suggesting what is to be done, but it is left to the HOD of the department to discuss it with this department and set it right. So now if we are not going to get a feedback, patients are also going to review us. So this is about one of our hospital, what the Google review says. And this again we keep track of these recordings, the Google and Just Dial. And again, this again is given to the chief medical officers of each hospital. Every month, this report is also given to them as to what is the current rating in Google. Just to summarize, so if you want to build and sustain a practice, you have to put in place a process of continuous improvement. You have to focus on regularly collecting patient care related data, the patient flow, clinical inputs, outcomes, satisfaction score, as what we saw. Review this evidence regularly. We need to act on the decisions taken we need to have a meeting to look at these data, review them, and take a decision as to what we need to do, and integrate these aspects into staff training as well. Because we have hardcore evidence, the recordings we take from the patients, both video, audio, and that really is very powerful. Just to conclude, all this is possible only when you have certain value system in the organization. And Dr. Rao talked about how do we solve the question of blindness, the problem of blindness. This again can happen only if the community have a faith and trust in our services across the country. We need to really build the aspect of empathy and compassion in our team members. We have to make sure that our organization, our practice is non-exploitative. And we had a discussion about our transparency. Dr. Bhujang Shetty brought it out very nicely. I think we have to be really transparent. That's how we build. We remain patient-centric, and we also can build the trust of the community, making sure that we serve everybody. And more important is we need to monitor and constantly improve. So only then we'll be able to do this. I think the quality is to be at the heart of everything we do. It must be understood from the perspective of patients. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Ravindran, for that wonderful enumeration about how to go about building your practice. In fact, all the three talks by Dr. Rao, Dr. Shetty, and Dr. Ravindran, I personally feel more than practice development, they also encompass a lot of issues concerning personality development. So all the three talks by all of these three stalwarts will go a long way in helping all the youngsters, the young ophthalmologists, and the practitioners in giving a thought about their practice, doing some introspection, and trying to go forward from where they stand. Thank you, Dr. Ravindran, for your kind talk. We move on. The next speaker is Dr. Amar Agarwal. His keynote lecture, Mastering PDEK and Pupilloplasty. Dr. Amar.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I'll just start sharing the screen.
Ravindra.
Yeah. Hi, I'm here.
Yeah, okay.
Hopefully, and I'm so glad. I'm thankful to.
Welcome, Dr. Ravindra. Yeah, you can share your screen.
Fine. I'm most thankful to Dr. Santosh Honavar and Dr. Manoj and Dr. Nandakishore and everybody in Telangana Society. I'll share my screen and I'll start my lecture. Is that visible?
Yes, your slideshow. Yes.
Slideshow. Fine. So the comment that I would like to make to a friend of mine who met me about 10, 15 years later, and he had seen me doing SICs at that time. When he was discussing with me now, he asked me, "Are you still doing SICs?" He was surprised and shocked. Am I only the person who is doing SICs in the country? No. Indian ophthalmic conferences over last 3 decades, have taught both MSICS and phacoemulsification in a ratio of 10:90. Everything is taught from the podiums or on phacoemulsification, very little on MSICS. So by this, we would expect everybody would have converted in 3 decades time. Let us see how many cataract surgeries are being done in our country in the recent past. 51 lakhs, except the last year was a little less because of COVID. It meets 90% of demands from the country. Government medical colleges and hospitals treat about 30% of our cataract patients. Private setups treats about 70%. Hopefully these are correct statistics because it came from a very senior officer. And the MSICS is performed on 75% of them with excellent results as compared to ICC and DCC. The people who have been doing MSICS are very happy with the results. And while phacoemulsification, in spite of 3 decades of constant teaching, is only about 25%. So I'm not alone here, but I'm one person who is talking about it. We go to a cardiologist. One of my relatives had a hernia surgery. They never spoke about what equipment they use, what technique they use, what mesh they used, or what stent used. Why are we in a mess? Patients come and ask me, that doctor is doing this doctor is doing this, are you doing the same thing? We have landed in a big mess and we have to repair back to where we were. Cataract surgery is an art as well as a science, and MSICS categorically falls into both the categories, both the issues. I'm grateful to my teacher. My fond teacher is Dr. L.P. Agarwal, who has made my life to whatever it is today, and to Dr. S.S. Badrinath. These are not the names of the halls here. These are people I've closely worked with. Dr. G.N. Rao in Rochester, and Dr. Ridley. I met him in AOS and had a long chat with him. And more than all, the Peter Kansas, who coined the word phacosection way back in 1991, 192, if I'm right. And he devised many instruments. He patented the word phacosection, and devised many instruments which are modified and are being used even now. Indian ophthalmology industry has to be respected, because whenever I needed a modification, I would have devised more than 500 instruments, and they came all the way to me, discussed with me, and created an instrument. So they are best, meets all international standards, they are affordable, and name any of these, they are available in India, they're world class. And the next thing that has come up over the last 5-6 years is digital era. We are on Zoom right now, and that's made learning extremely easy. So having gone through various institutions, I would remember modified Smith-Indian technique taught by my teacher, Prem Prakash. I was very fond of this technique. I must have done more than 10,000-20,000 surgeries using that. Rural Tamil Nadu, I spent 1 year where extremely big poverty was seen. Bilateral hypomature cataracts, any number, thousands. They are standing in a queue for treatment. Makeshift camps, that's a place where I shifted from Smith-Indian technique, modified it to clear corneal ICC. I used to do a limbal incision without any bleeding, put 3 80 silk sutures, and excellent results post-operatively. Shankar Netle had a VR fellowship. University of Rochester, along with Jane Rao, had a fellowship. After this, everybody would have predicted that I would come back and settle down with phacoemulsification practice, which I did not. Prem Prakash, Federow, I was with Federow in the OT at All India Institute, and I saw him performing ICC and the Sputnik IOL. Dr. Akira Momo said, this moment has changed my life. It was an AOS conference. I met him there, and he was operating. I came to know that he was operating at Woodland Hospital in Calcutta. I smuggled myself inside into the operation theater. I saw him. Next to him, I was standing, because microscopes had no teaching mirrors there, teaching videos at that point of time. And I saw him putting Sputnik lens, which was devised by Federow. After ICC, I learned the secret of his techniques, and the very first IOL in entire South India was implanted in 1982. And then I switched over to ECC from ICC in 1984, and tunnel size was reduced from 12 to 8 millimeters, and I perfected the shoelace technique. I developed the Lions Eye Hospital. Abundant innovations were possible there. Modernized eye camps, eye banks, eye banking, operation theater. The very first STARS machine, phaco machine, was bought in South India in 1992. I remember that year. And first phaco workshop was held in South India at that time. Dr. Mahipal Sachdev was one of the faculty for us, and we did a live phaco surgery. And that's the time when we shifted over to phaco machine, but we were doing a lot of surgeries. We shifted over to microscope, flash autoclave, ETO machine, and the trend was, because we had the microscope, we used to do one phaco and send it back for sterilization. There was no question of reusing phaco probes. And I was a student of Dr. Badrinath. That was never accepted. So we could finish 4 ECC and then 1 phaco, 4 ECC and 1 phaco. So then we developed SICS. That's the birth of SICS in India. And what happened was, in an AOS meet again, I'm grateful to my AOS, relations. And in the short trade booth, I saw a VCR. I was just passing through, and that VCR at that moment was showing a phacosuction surgery by Peter Kansas. I begged and borrowed the cassette, and that changed my outlook towards cataract surgery. There are a lot of misconceptions. Is MSICS?
Got 8 minutes to go, MS Ravindra.
Fine, I'll rush through. The tunnel size is similar in SICS and phaco. There is nothing. If you calculate how much of openings you made, they are very similar. I'll go through it, and it's compatible with topical anesthesia. You can do under topical anesthesia very well, because there is no push or stretch on the ciliary body, and astigmatism that you produce is less than 5 consistently, and you can plan to produce a specific astigmatism. Perfect asepsis is possible with this. You don't have to carry out instruments from one set to another, which is quite popular in our country. And Simcoe bulb and IA cannula were first gifted by Dr. Gill in an eye camp. And we don't need hooks, pupil extension rings, CTRs. Most of the complexity is very comfortable to do a surgery. Both open chamber and closed chamber techniques. Open chamber is my favorite technique in many steps of cataract. Closed chamber is also possible like a phacoemulsification in steps. So excellent control on fluidics, and the entire amount of fluid that you need is about 30 to 50 ml. Controlled inflow, controlled outflow is possible when you use Simcoe cannula and bulb. Resume normal activities. Next day, the patient can have a shower and wash face. The very next day, washing exercise is possible. And these are all possible in MICS. The amount of medicines you need post-operatively is very, very less when compared to any other technique. What are the advantages? Perfect asepsis is possible. Quick, long community service is possible. CMCs become suddenly affordable when you practice this. Premium surgeries of any lens can be obtained. Most importantly, surgical skills of the surgeon are retained. You don't lose on the skills of your surgery, and learning curve is similar in both of them. I think again, there is some problem here. Yeah, I'll show you a video that I practice currently. Is that visible? Is the video visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Fine. So this is the current technique of me in a cataract.
Oh, we're not seeing the video.
Video is not this.
It's not playing.
Only your screen.
This is only a screen, so the video is not playing.
Okay. I'll share it again.
Ravindra, are you able to see it on your screen?
Yes.
Then why? You can probably close this one and then.
How about now? Now is that visible?
No, we are seeing.
Not yet, sir. You'll have to reshare it, sir.
Yeah, you have to redo the whole thing once again.
You have to, yeah, now you are off. Yeah.
How about
Yes,
now?
sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
now
sir.
we are able to
Perfect.
see.
Fine. That's the current technique of SICS that I perform. That's a no conjunctival Tenon's flap. I go in about 2.5 millimeters, starting from the anterior most sclera, enter the chamber, fill the chamber with viscoelastic. This is the only point where the pressure is little higher. Otherwise, it's always less than 20. This histotome enters the anterior chamber through a perforation in the floor of the tunnel at the limbus. AC is filled. There is no leak of viscoelastic. This I call it as tunnel floor entry technique. I could do a very good rhexis of the size you want. You can also take a guidance of a ring which is measuring 6 millimeter placed on the cornea. I'll go a little fast.
What is the second of the sixth panel conference?
That's I rotate the nucleus epinucleus complex. I don't separate nucleus epinucleus. There's a capsular separating hydrodissection. I bisect the nucleus. That's a mini vectis, as you can see on the left side. 2 nuclei are removed. Note that the pressure is not high at all. The anterior chamber depth is normal. It's an open chamber at this time, as I was telling in my lecture. Aspirate the cortex. It's very easy. I slit the cartilage. This tunnel will not take the entire lens, which I would like to roll it, but I do not want to damage the lens. I slit the cartilage and put it inside. Any lens of your choice can be implanted. I'm doing it on upper temporal quadrant, that's the steep axis of half diopter. This tunnel corrects that, remove this, and that's the end of surgery. Please tell me when I complete is that visible?
Yeah.
Fine. Any cataract of any type, any shape, whether the pupil is dilated or not, is material. I'm doing a small can opening in the center, debulk the capsular contents, and do a rhexis now, and then place the lens inside that. Okay. I think I still have time.
You have 3 minutes more.
You have 2 minutes.
I can complete it.
No, just cut it down by 1 minute.
Sure. So the intraback bisection is a new technique that I have learned in the recent past. I bisect the nucleus using a cystotome. I don't need any special instruments. And it is especially useful when the pupil is small like this, and when the capsulorhexis also is small. It's very difficult to remove the entire nucleus, especially if it is thick and hard, into the anterior chamber. So heminucleus, you can take it out and now extract it and put the lens. Very elegant technique and very friendly to the endothelium. Posterior polar cataracts, in my opinion, there is no pre-existing tear in the posterior capsule. I firmly believe in it because any number of them, if you don't pressurize the anterior chamber and stretch the posterior capsule backwards, this will never tear. I do a hydrodissection even in these patients. Segmental hydrodissection comes up to the edge of the posterior pole or opacification. You can see the plaque coming out, and this is the time when you pressurize the eye. That's the time. That's an exposed posterior capsule. It gets pushed backwards, and you can tear it. If you don't push the posterior capsule backwards, there's no tear. You can see beautifully the entire posterior plaque has come out, and that's the implantation of the lens. The surgery is so gentle. There is a dehiscence here. There's an injury, post-injury.
MS, your video is not playing, but.
The video is not there. I am thinking that you are just.
There's no video?
There's no video, MS.
Yeah.
I'll try doing it again. How about this?
Yeah, now it's coming.
Now, this is a case which had a blunt trauma. You see the posterior synechiae, the eye is inflamed. There is the donesis, and there is on the lower temporal side where there is a zonular dehiscence. I can go inside, do a good rhexis. The lens is mobile. I don't care about it. Very gentle surgery. I'm not deepening the anterior chamber. Hydrodissection done. You can see now, you can see how much is the dehiscence. More than 3 clock hours is dehiscent, but it can still bisect the nucleus. And then you're committed on a lens, which is probably, there's a multifocal lens I could place it. There's no need for a CTR, no need for iris hooks, anything in these gentle surgeries. One other thing that you can do beautifully is an iris claw lens. As you can see here, there is a posterior capsular rent. There is no vitreous loss, if I'm right, in this patient. Align it to the MBR entries that you made, exactly opposite to each other. Hold it and very gently lift the haptic up so that it engages against the 27 gauge cannula. Very gentle surgery, and this is possible when you have a larger tunnel that is done with the SICS. Please tell me I can stop it anytime.
Yes, sir. Your time's up.
Time's up. I'll just show this video. This is another beautiful technique of snare in the anterior chamber. You'll have to be very careful about the endothelium. What I do is I continuously inject viscoelastic in front of the nucleus, bisect it. These two can be taken it out comfortably with your standard technique. So I'm grateful to Telangana Society for giving me this privilege to present my concepts on, my thoughts on SICs, which should remain as the major component of our training programs. Unfortunately, our kids are not interested in SICs anymore, and they learn to some level, promote themselves to a fake one, they forget, and by that they lose a lot of opportunities to give the best care to many of the patients who deserve our attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravindra.
So let's look at this simple. I'm taking a proline needle. I've taken the proline needle and it's gone through the iris. From the other side, I told you, through a paracentesis, 30 gauge needle, railroad the two. Now bring this loop out. Once my loop is out, see that number 4. I passed that thing 4 times. That's all you have to do. Once you have passed it 4 times, pull on each end. And that is game, set, and match. That completes the single pass 4th row pupilloplasty. Now, normally you do 3, 2, 2. In this case, if you realize we have just done it 4 and that's it. Now, this is what I've done in one side. I can do the same thing on the other side, and that completes my 4th row pupilloplasty. Now, let's take the difficulty slightly higher. If I have a patient with Ureth Zavalia, this patient had a glued IOL, pupil is fixed, dilated, there is mydriasis, there is photophobia. I fixed fluid in the eye, if you notice. There's an infusion cannula inside. Now I go inside, I'm going to catch that iris. Remember, catch always. Pass the needle through clear cornea. Again, many people who are doing 4th row use paracentesis on both sides. You don't need. You need the paracentesis only on the side when you're pulling it out. Pass the 30 gauge needle, bring it out railroad. Now all I need to do is bring that loop, which is the single pass, to the center of the IOL area. Once it is there, I will take my forceps, grab that loop and pull it out. Now, remember, again, as I told you people, 4 times you have to pass it, and that completes this single pass 4-throw pupillasty. Remember, this was a Uret-Zavalia in which the patient had mydriasis. So obviously the patient has photophobia being dilated. I do one more area, and that is the post-op. So you can see now, in no time, this area has cleared. So pre-op, post-op. Let's take the difficulty slightly more. Take Uret-Zavalia syndrome now. But look at the angles. They are closed. It's an anterior segment OCT showing total close. The intraocular pressure is sky high. Now, in such cases, we tend to do traps or valve or something like that. Not needed. The game plan is simple. I am going to break these synechiae. In other words, I'm going to make a closed angle into an open angle with fluid passing back into the trabecular meshwork. That's the game plan. So what we are going to do now is, we are going to do a single pass 4-throw pupillasty and pull that iris together so that the closed angle becomes open angle. And depending on the nomogram, how bad the case is, you can do a 4-point traction or a 6-point traction. In such cases, I have an IOL. Remember, the capsule is intact. So put a trocar AC maintainer. You can see that trocar, it is just going through the sclera, 0.5 millimeter from the limbus, but it is above the iris. That's a trocar AC maintainer which we had designed. Now we are doing the 4-throw pupillasty, as you can see, bringing the loop out like I showed you in the animation and the video. 4 times you pass, pull it inside, and all you'll see is, notice the pupil coming smaller, the angle getting opened. You can do as much as you want till you find enough of the angle open. You can check it on intraoperative gonioscopy, but look at the picture there. On the right-hand side, look at the anterior segment OCT open. Now, one more thing, retina people, they're doing silicone oil. And I see this, when you do silicone oil, pressure is high. We remove the silicone oil. It will not solve the problem. Please do an anterior segment OCT. Check what is happening. What we are seeing is, there'll be a closed angle glaucoma. All I do is I've made it an open angle. Look at the anterior segment OCT pre and post. Can I dilate? Yes, you can. We published this in the JCRS in 2017 October. And you can see here the pre-op and the post-op after dilatation. What if I combine it with glued IOL and PDEC? Look at this pre-op and the post-op. And I'll come back to this case much later in my next video. I'll be showing that to you. But look at this other patient here. One-eyed patient, failed PK. Look at the anterior segment OCT below that. All I have done is, I've done the 4-throw pupillasty with PDEC, and you can see the post-op picture, how the patient looks. Remember, one-eyed patient, failed PK. Now, coming back to the question of pinhole pupillasty, we then decided, can I make it small? If I make it 1.5 millimeters, the idea is very simple. The rays of light will go through the center. The aberrations get knocked off. This patient will see distance and near without glasses. This was the first case which we did, in which there was scarring because of the bad SICS surgical wound somebody had created. The astigmatism was about 24 diopters. You can do DAL, you can do a pinhole IOL, but remember, this is a very simple thing. What is my cost to the patient? Just a suture. Look at the pre-op, post-op improved to 6/12 vision, and that completed this case of pinhole pupilloplasty. So once I've finished that, I'm going to move on to another video, which I'm going to show you just now. Let me know if it comes on the screen right now. Are you seeing it?
Yes, we are seeing it.
Is it moving, Raju?
Yes.
Okay. I'll keep it small screen. I apologize for that. So I don't want to waste time for everyone on the storyline running behind. Can you see the case now?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's look at this patient now. This patient was referred to me from Bombay. And this was one of the top surgeons, president of AIOS, Dr. S. Natarajan from Bombay. This patient had been operated 6 times, had gone for a simple cataract surgery, not to Nutty's place, but somewhere else, got a dropped IOL. And you know how the work, it just went on. She wanted to commit suicide. Nutty met me and said, Amar, I'm sending this case to you. I was operating this patient the 7th time. And if you notice, there is scarring also present there. So I said, okay, Anati, send the case over. And when I took up the case, this is how the case was looking. I took off the epithelium. I can't see anything. Don't worry. If you are not seeing anything, remember in the OT, I was also not seeing anything. I made my flaps, scleral flaps, and you can notice I'm making a sclerotomy with a 22 gauge sclerotomy. Now I'm going in and doing my vitrectomy. I can't see posteriorly, so I've just fixed a trocar AC maintainer again, and I'm doing my vitrectomy. I can't see anything. So I decide, let me take off this bad scarred mess which is there. So this bad endothelium desmase complex, you notice the scarring is so bad, it is also stuck to the iris. So now what I thought was, let me catch it with one hand and cut it with the other. So I'm using the micro scissor to dissect, and you'll see me doing that just now. Notice my assistant is holding an endoilluminator from the other hand to help me see better, because obviously I can't see anything much. To be honest, I don't even know what's inside that eye right now. I take off this bad scarred tissue there. Now I'm seeing what is there inside. And if you will notice, there is something moving inside there. So I see, okay, something is moving there, something is glistening there. That looks to me like a dislocated intraocular lens. So I do my vitrectomy, and now I'm scared this IOL does not drop down. So before it drops down, I want to go inside with the forceps and catch it somewhere. It does not matter where you catch it. Catch it somewhere. Now pass the other forceps. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the handshake technique. I'll transfer the haptic from one hand to the other. And you'll see transferring it from one hand to the other there till I find the tip of the haptic. Once you find the tip, externalize. Now I'm safe, because now I know this lens will not go down. Though I've got only one haptic out, I'm okay. So now I do my vitrectomy, clear up the muck which is present there. But remember, I still have my second haptic inside there. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go in, catch the haptic anywhere. I can't see. So I'm trying to see as much as possible with the endometer, with my assistant holding. And you can see I've caught it somewhere. Wherever you catch it, again now, transfer from one hand to the other. And you can see there, I'm transferring it from one hand to the other, handshake technique, till I catch the tip of the haptic. Catch the tip, externalize, and that is again game set. So now I've got my 26 gauge needle. I create the Gabor-Chariot's pocket, tuck my haptics inside. So you can see now both haptics gone inside. Now I have to make that pupil all right. You remember, I messed up the pupil a little bit also personally myself when I was removing the scar tissue. So I'll do the single pass fourth-row pupillasty. Now, in such cases, when I'm going to end obviously with PDEC, and I'll explain to you that in a second, I now have decided I make them a pinhole pupillasty. Why? Now what I do with the fourth-row pupillasty is, I have made a closed angle open. 2, the pinhole will solve all my astigmatism, even in PDEC if it is coming or anything which is there. 3, the air which is in the anterior chamber will remain there and will not go back. So now I'm doing my single pass fourth-row pupillasty, and you can see I'll continue doing this as much as possible till I get my game centered. Basically, if you see those 3 dots, the Purkinje images, when you're doing a pinhole pupillasty, see that the Purkinje image is bang centered onto the pupil. And you can see that's what I've done. Now, once I have done that, I've got my glued IOL in place. I've got my fourth-row pupillasty in place. I've got it like a pinhole pupillasty. My next step is push in air and see if it's remaining. It looks like it's remaining. All I need to do is through my trocar ACM, I've got air pump connected. Now watch PDEC. Now, I tell you what, we do about 100 keratoplasties a month here in Agarwal here. And I tell you what, I do 0 DSECs and 0 DMECs. Very simple reason why. In DSEC, please understand, we are taking 80 micron or 100 micron, whatever it is. So basically a 500 micron cornea, if you add another 100, it will become 600 micron. In DMEC, you're taking 15 and putting 15 inside. Is fantastic. But there is one basic problem which I see in DMECs. And that is one, that in DMEC, I cannot take off the donor till the donor is about 40 or 50 years of age. In PDEC, we take 25 microns, but remember, any donor age. I don't look at donors above 35 or 40. I take all donors who are young. So how do you do PDEC? You are looking at the endothelium now. Take a 30 gauge needle from the sclera, And you can see I've created a type 1 bubble. This bubble does not go to the periphery. Where is the air? You have the endothelium, you have the desmase, you have the Duas layer, then the air. If the bubble went to the periphery, it was a type 2 bubble. In other words, you'll get a DMEC graft. Now, all I do is inject my trypan blue, dissect my graft, load it like you'll do in DMEC, inject it inside. Another big advantage in PDEC is what? You can manipulate the tissue. You can see the manipulation is fantastic, which you cannot do in DMEC. The third thing is there's dislocations. These things don't need rebubbling. So all I have done now is fix the glue inside. Now the question comes, how did this patient behave? This is the pre-op, and you can see now how the patient looks post-op. This is the 15th day post-op. And now let me show you the next final picture here is the 45 days post-op. So what did we do? We did a gluteal, we did the fourthropuplasty, and we did the PDEC. I'll just end this presentation with one final video, which I thought I should show you people on. And I hope you're seeing the video. Are we seeing the video?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. This patient was from Poland. He was an actor. He's a top actor from Poland. And if you can see him, cornea is messed up, no doubt about it. But look at that iris. That's also messed up in style. So when he came to us for surgery, I took off the epithelium. Now, if you notice, there's a huge iridiolysis. So what I'm going to do now is I need fluid in the eye. So I always use a trocar AC maintainer. Remember the trocar ACM goes through 0.5 millimeter from the sclera, but it's above the iris. Now I've got fluid in the eye. My next step is look at where the iridiolysis is. And this is a technique which we started called trocar assisted iridiolysis. Simple thing which anyone can do. Take another trocar, right opposite the iridiolysis, past the trocar. There was a hangback technique which was started by Michael Snyder. We modified that by using the trocar assisted iridiolysis. Now all I need to do is take a proline double-armed needle. And Ravindran is there, so I use always the Orolab ones, which are fantastic. Here you can see the proline 90 suture there. Pass it through the trocar. The advantage is the needle does not get stuck into the corneal lips. The second advantage is the trocar guides the needle. Now from the other side, through the scleral groove which I've created, I pass a 30 gauge needle, railroad the two, bring it out. Once I've brought one out, you'll see I'll bring my second also out there. And you can see now one loop has come out. All I need to do is pull the second one out also there. So here you see the second needle, which is the double arm of the proline, pass through the trocar, again goes through that iris there. Once it goes through the iris there, from the other side, you'll notice I'm now going to use a 30 gauge needle. Here you can see I'm just holding on to the iris with one hand, passing the needle into that iris there. Once done there, you'll see me now taking this 30 gauge needle, bringing it out there. Once that's done, remember you've got a double arm, all you need to do is pull it. So iridiolysis repair will become extremely easy and fast here. Ravi Kumar has done a great technique of the sewing machine technique, which is a really excellent technique. So you can follow any technique of your choice, but by and large, I tend to use the trocar assisted iridiolysis because it's fast and simple. I just have to move it a bit, and I do in the second area, another area of iridiolysis. Now the problem is when you do iridiolysis, the whole iris comes to one side. So when you finish the iridiolysis, remember you got to add to that the single pass fourthropuplasty, because that is the twofold technique. In other words, you're combining the trocar assisted iridiolysis now with the single pass fourthropuplasty. Here you can see I'm just doing the trocar assisted iridiolysis, but obviously the pupil gets distorted by that. Now I'm going to break the synechiae, because this patient, being from Poland and not being treated there for quite some time, the synechiae had formed a lot there. So now I'm breaking these peripheral anterior synechiae. Again, as I explained to you previously, all I'm going to do is then by the single pass fourthropuplasty, I'll be making the closed angle open. And you can see now here I'm passing the needle for the single pass fourthropuplasty and making that pupil smaller. Once I have done that, you will notice how the pupil can get smaller. But remember, the patient has got a corneal damage, obviously, as you can see in the beginning of that video there. Here you can see the single pass photopupillasty being done. I'll make that pupil smaller as much as possible. In these cases where the iris is so badly damaged, you might not get a very aesthetic picture, but that's not the issue. When you talk of pinhole pupillasty, you have patients like RK done. You know, whatever you do and IOL you put, I tell you what, in our case, bad our case, those powers are not going to be very stable. Whereas with the pinhole pupillasty done in RK eyes, that problem it gets solved. Because whatever the astigmatism, I'm not bothered. It gets neutralized anyway with the photopupillasty. Coming back to this case, you can see one more final picture which I'm going to show you just now. I'm doing one more single pass photopupillasty on the other end. Now all I need to do is see, you have made it like a slit, and I need to take a vitrectomy probe at this time and enlarge the pupil so that my pupil is bank centered. My game plan is what? The Purkinje image P1 falls onto the center of the pupil, and you can see that's your end point. Here you can see I made my Purkinje image onto the center of the pupil there. All I need to do is shift to air. I've got air pump assisted PDEC. Take off my endothelium desiccation, just like you'll do in simple any endothelial keratoplasty. Take the PDEC graft, as you can see, I'm just creating another PDEC graft here. Load it inside just like normal. You can use any method you want, your glass rod or a injector, whichever one you want to call is going to be yours. I don't mark. I use always an endo-illuminator to see inside clearly which side is on and which side is off. Inject it inside. So the final picture before I close this final presentation of mine, I'd like to show you the post-op ending of this particular case. And you'll see there, all I need to do is unroll it, push in air again. Now air is continuously flowing inside. The advantage in PDEC is I can manipulate and unroll the graft there. And as I said, all my grafts will be younger donors always. So the question comes now, how did this Polish top actor behave pre-op? And you can see post-op day 3, 3 weeks post-op. And you can see now the patient 2 months post-op. So I'd like to now thank Santosh Honavar. I'd like to thank the entire Telangana Society and everyone here. And again, as I said, NSD, MS Ravindra, Bhujang Shetty, GN Rao, and Ravindra, all of them, such great stalwarts. Such a pleasure to be here in front of all of them. Thank you very much.
Dr. G.R. Reddy.
Rose.
Yeah, hi, GR. Yeah, you can share your screen and begin. Like, just in time, you can speak. Yeah, you just share screen. Screen.
At the onset, my sincere thanks to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences of visual fields in glaucoma. If anybody asks what is the diagnosis by showing the single field analysis printout, this slide will tell you that never interpret visual fields in isolation. It should always be correlated with the fundus. This is the most important take-home message one should know. This case, I saw in 2016, diagnosed as a glaucoma suspected on the basis of disc disparity, history of strong family history of glaucoma, and IOP around 20 millimeters of mercury. And the single field analysis printout of both eyes are showing localized scotomas with the reliability of 100% perfect, fixation losses, false positives and negatives, both eyes 100% perfect, and fulfilling the Anderson's criteria. And the patient was diagnosed with glaucoma and put here on medical management. The most important point one should note is whenever you see edge scotomas, and if they are absolute scotomas, you please think of rim artifact and repeat the test. When the test is repeated, again it is very, very well done, filled with 100% perfection. And all edge scotomas disappeared. Even the OCT is normal. The most important take-home message is never be in a hurry in diagnosing glaucoma in a case of glaucoma suspect, because over-diagnosing glaucoma, you will have a lot of psychological impact on the patient. Now I will be showing 3 cases of glaucoma who are diagnosed at a very early stage, but unfortunately they progressed. Now I will tell you by the progress. This patient I saw in 2003 with a localized field defects. Most probably at that time I don't have fundus camera and I don't have the disc photographs. And I diagnosed as glaucoma, put on medical management. Somehow I lost the follow-up. And again I saw the patient in 2016, the branch vein occlusion with advanced glaucomatous field defects. Again, the second patient, this patient, I diagnosed glaucoma, even though there is no definite clue from the fundus, looking like large physiological cup, but the IOPs are around 20, and repeated field, showing the field effect, consistent field effects, diagnosed the glaucoma, and put on medical management. But somehow I lost the follow-up. And again, I saw the patient after 10 years with advanced cups with advanced field effects. So though both the cases are diagnosed very early, the outcome is poor. The most important take-home message in this case is, once you realize the patient is not convinced with your diagnosis, it is our responsibility to make him realize that he had glaucoma, a dangerous disease, and if the patient is not convinced, it is our responsibility to send him to a higher center and make him know that he had glaucoma and he has to use the drops throughout his life. This patient I saw in 2005. The IOP is around 20 with a strong family history. Her sisters, brothers, mother, a very strong family history of glaucoma. And the right eye IOP is more than the left eye, but they diagnosed it at a very early stage. And I put the drops in both the eyes, anti-glaucoma medication. Because she belongs to a different town, she was under the care of another ophthalmologist. Actually, that ophthalmologist advised, put the drops only in the right eye and need not put on the left eye and keep under observation because the IOP is not high. But the patient did not understand properly. She started putting drops in the left eye and she did not put the drops in the right eye, and right eye advanced. So the most important take-home message is not only diagnose early stage, but we have to spend enough time with the patient, how he should use the anti-glaucoma drops, and always make it a point. Whenever the patient comes for review, ask the patient to come along with the drops and again check whether she is using correctly the correct drops and using in the drops properly or not. This is also a very important point, one should know that. Now we know the diagnosis is over. After the diagnosis, what is the role of visual fields? The role of visual fields is to set the target IOP. So analysis of the field defect, where exactly started, the location, extent, depth, and direction of progression. All these factors should be taken into consideration of any field defect to set the target IOP. Now I will be presenting the three cases, localized field defects. If you see the single field analysis printout of the three cases, almost they are looking, the localized field defects, almost they are looking approximately similar. But if you analyze these field defects under the following headings, you will realize how different they are. Take for example, this first case, this localized field defect. If you see the probability plots, we may not appreciate where exactly the glaucoma started. But if you see the raw data or the total deviation numerical plot, you will appreciate in the deep scotoma. The deep scotoma tells you from where the glaucoma started, and superficial scotomas, they tell the direction of progression. Here glaucoma started at the periphery outside 10 degrees and it is progressing towards the fixation in this case. Because it is involving the 10-degree point, a small scotoma appeared in the 10-degree field. So if I take for example the second case, if you see the probability plot, you cannot know where exactly glaucoma started, which is the deep scotoma, because any loss of retinal sensitivity more than 8 dB will be represented by black square. Minus 30 is also black square, minus 20 is also black square, minus 10 is also black square. But if you see here, minus 34. Here the glaucoma started at the 3-degree point, and this is absolute scotoma, because the loss of retinal sensitivity among the 16 points within 10 degrees is an indication to repeat the test with 10-2, and 10-2 is repeated. And if you see that glaucoma is almost starting from the 1-degree point, and so that means the glaucoma starting within 10 degrees. So the mean deviation, you should know what is the mean deviation in 24-2, what is the mean deviation in 10-2, what is the extent of the field effect in 10 degrees, what is the extent of the field effect in 24-degree point pattern. All should be considered to set the target IOP. This is the third case. If you see the probability plots, this probability plot, if you see, it looks like as if it is a single biarcade scotoma. But if you see the grayscale and the pattern deviation probability plot, they tell that there are two different scotomas. One scotoma is starting from the periphery, one scotoma is starting from the center. That means one field effect is starting from here, another field effect here. Here the glaucoma is starting within 10 degrees and outside 10 degrees. And if you, because there is an absolute scotoma here, and if you take 10-2, you will have the field effect in the 10-2. The mean deviation of minus. So with this, previously what we thought is usually glaucoma starts from the periphery and it comes to the center, and the last the field involved will be within 10 degrees. And but nowadays we are seeing glaucomas starting within 10 degrees, and if you see the 24-2, the 24-2 will have a minimal scotoma and the mean deviation will not be very severe. And if you see the 10-2, you can see the 10 hues with a mean deviation index of -12 to -13 around. So the concept of the conventional concept is not now we can it doesn't hold nowadays now till date. So the most important thing is you should never grade glaucoma on the basis of mean deviation index. So now up to now the glaucomas are classified on the basis of IOP as primary open angle glaucoma and normal tension glaucoma. Then there are I thought why glaucomas cannot be classified on the basis of perimetry. Glaucoma starting outside 10 degrees, glaucoma starting within 10 degrees, and glaucoma starting outside and within 10 degrees. Because this concept is very, very important to identify the extent and depth is very, because you have to consider both 24-2 field, 10-2 field, then only you can have the correct idea how to set the target IOP. This patient I saw followed from 2006 to 2018. If you see the fundus, almost it is looking like stable glaucoma. Even the fields also are looking like very stable with a mean deviation of -5 in 2005, minus almost same in 2016, little more than in 2018. But in 2018, the patient complained that somehow he is having some difficulty in the reading and there is no change in cataract status. And actually in 2006 itself, 5 itself, there is an absolute scotoma here. And I should have taken the 10-2 in 2005, which I missed. See, when 2016, when I took the 10-2, you see the scotoma is traveling. This is the 3 degree, the 24-2 point pattern, overlapped on the 10-degree grayscale. And it is a 3-degree point, this is the 9-degree point. This scotoma is traveling between 3 and 9. That is why this is not picked up in the grayscale of 24-. It was missed. Actually, it might have been there in 2005. So the most important thing is we should know all the indications when to repeat the test with 10-2. Even this field effect in the 10-2 is also not picked up by even OCT, because this field effect is shown here, but this field effect even not picked up by OCT. That means that one should realize that it is not always true that the OCT will pick up the field effects earlier to the visual fields. That should be also taken into consideration. Now, this patient I saw from 2003 to 2017 till date, 17, even today, I saw the same patient. The most important lesson what I learned is from this patient. From 2003 to 2006, these are the probability plots, and the probability plots are also almost looking very stable. But because for progression, you have to see the mean deviation index and you have to see the grayscale. You see the mean deviation is changed from 7 to 12, and the grayscale, you see there is a progression in the grayscale. Because once the loss of retinal sensitivity is more than 8 dB, it is a black square. So 8 dB is also black there, further loss is also black square. So vertical progression will not be appreciated in the probability plots. That is very, very important. Vertical progression cannot be appreciated in the probability plots, which can be appreciated in the grayscale. And it can be change in visual field index and change in mean deviation also will give you an idea. Another most important thing is normally the macular program is most underused program, and usually it is confined, is restricted to know only the foveal split with size 5. Take for example, this patient is having almost all absolutes in 10-2. There are 68 points with the point to point is 2 degrees and 1 point from the center, 1 degree point. So all these points need not be tested because they're all absolute scotomas. And I will have to know only this amount whether there is a progression or not. For this, in the follow-up
Doctor, please pardon the interruption. You have 1 minute to conclude the presentation.
We can finish this one. We can see the macular program and we can assess this. So the macular program can be, one should know how to use the macular program more often. So my journey of understanding visual fields started with Y and with a strong self-belief, late 90s. And why pattern deviation plots are created, why probability plots, they look similar in localized scotomas, why the scotomas will be more in pattern plot when false positives are there, and why put a teacup on the grayscale that is usual teaching in late 90s. Is it true? That hard work of years and years finally got answers, not from any book. It is only by understanding the fundamentals from the single field analysis printout. So all the answers why will be known from my book. Everybody, people say that it's a well-written book on visual fields. Had I waited for perfection, I would not have written this book. The journey of perfection will go on. Thank you all for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. G. R. Reddy, for that insightful exposition about visual fields, and you have very nicely correlated, like the visual field looks something theoretical, how to set target pressure based on visual fields. That is quite an exposition, and I hope most of the practitioners gain a lot of knowledge from your talk. I call upon next Dr. Arulmozi Verman to give his talk. You can share screen, sir.
Oh, yes. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, we can see you. No problem. Go ahead.
I'm not able to see the share screen.
You have to share screen, sir, the green button at the bottom.
Yes, but the whole thing has disappeared. Just 1 minute.
Sir, it will be minimized. Please maximize.
I'm ready now. Yes, there we are.
Yes. Correct. Just
good evening. Thanks to the TOS, the office bearers, and Dr. Santosh Hanover for asking me to be here. The talk that I've been told to give is on target emmetropia. This talk deserves a complete 3-hour symposium if you want to do justice to it. I will go through it in a very, very fast manner. Target emmetropia is the aim of all cataract surgery. It started not today, not yesterday. It started the day that IOL was implanted. Probably when Reedley put the IOL in first, the thought process was to remove the dependence on glasses. That meant trying to get clear vision without glasses. It didn't really matter for several decades. It's over the last 10 years or so that target emmetropia has become really important because of the advent of newer and better lenses. And these lenses, such as the aspheric lenses or multifocal lenses or toric lenses or trifocal or EDOF lenses, all of them work better when you're within preferably 0.5 plus or minus of 0. If you're off by even 0.75, then you've lost all the advantages of these high-end lenses. So it becomes a demand from the patient side and a promise from the doctor's side when we put in one of these advanced lenses that you're going to hit the nail on the head day in and day out for every single eye. It's quite difficult, but it's not impossible. See, target hypermetropia starts with biometry. Once you've got all your numbers right, then you go to the right calculation. You calculated it right, everything is on course, you choose the right IOL. And of course, it does help to have a meticulous surgical technique to have the best visual outcomes. So most important on biometry, I would put down keratometry as the most important. Next most important would be the anterior chamber depth, the lens thickness, white to white. In my personal opinion, axial length would come a poor fourth. While all of us seem to think that axial length has to be perfectly measured to get the IOL power accurately. Yes, it should be, but your small error in axial length is far more forgiving than an error in keratometry. So K values ought to be perfect. It can be done with manual or an auto keratometer. A telecentric would be the best. We need to know today with the advanced lenses, advanced calculation software, we would love to know the posterior K. We should know what is the curvature on the back of the cornea, and we'd love to have the true K. With these, you're really going to have much higher accuracy. But again, does just somebody with a manual keratometer, can he or she not get perfect results? You can. With a manual keratometer, if it is properly calibrated, done properly on an eye that is not cornea, that's not been disturbed, you get an accurate value. The newer formulae such as the Barrett Universal 2 toric will assume the posterior K and the true K quite accurately. You need not worry unless you're dealing with very difficult situations such as post LASIK, post RK, or a post keratoconus or a keratoconus patient. Unless all these problems are there, a manual K does extremely well. So you need not depend upon a very high-end expensive machine. Autokeratometers are quite accurate. Again, they should be checked for their accuracy. Telecentric keratometry is now available, and that really gives you one of the most accurate keratometric readings possible. And several instruments today would give you the posterior K and true K. And if you can have that done properly with individual patients, difficult situations become easy. When would you do topography? Is topography absolutely necessary when you want to calculate hypermetropia? Not really. When would you use topography? If you want to be absolutely sure about the astigmatism axis. Sometimes the K values on the axis that you get off a keratometer is not as accurate as in the axis as a topography. So if you're going to put on a toric lens, maybe it would be nice to look at the topography and see if both coincide. If not, check out why. Topography really helps in difficult situations, post LASIK, post RK, keratoconus patients. So there it probably is very useful. For a run-of-the-mill cataract surgery, topography is definitely not necessary. ACD, lens thickness, and white to white, extremely important, particularly in the newer formulae. All of these are very, very necessary. All of them can be taken even with an ultrasound machine. ACD, lens thickness can be read off. White to white can be measured with a caliper. So we have nothing to lose if you don't have a high-end machine. But having said that, the most accurate readings you're going to get with a step source OCT-based biometers. There are several in the market. I use an IOL Master 700, no financial interest, but the future or the present stays with a swept source OCT-based biometers. They give you all of these readings at one go and very accurately at that. And because it's an OCT-based instrument, it can look at the posterior K quite accurately. Then we come to the formula. As of today, the formula that to go to would be the Barrett Universal 2 toric. It's available on the net. You don't have to spend 1 rupee on it. It's available on the APACRS website. All of us can use the latest version at any given time, and it is wonderful formula to go to. Nothing changes so fast today as the formula. Now, Barrett Universal 2 is going to get very soon overtaken by Kane or Evo or probably RBF hill. So as we speak, the whole scenario keeps changing. So the calculation formulae are going to be an interesting outcome in the next 1 or 2 years, and it's going to keep more and more, getting more and more accurate. So Barrett Universal 2 has an advantage that even if you're using a manual instrument and you're using ultrasound biometers, it corrects for all of those small little errors and gives you a fantastic, accurate outcome. So it does have its own way of filling in the gaps that are not available on the standard instruments or the ones that are available only on the more advanced instruments. So I would tell everybody to go with the Barrett Universal 2 toric for every single patient. Then you choose the IOL. Is it toric? Do you want a multifocal? Do you want an EDOF? Do you want an aspheric? Or in some cases, you would really put a spherical IOL. Choose the IOL accurately. When would you choose an toric? Whenever the astigmatism is over 1 diopter, please put in a toric IOL. Can you do an LRI? Around 1 diopter or lesser, LRI also would work if it's done properly with the proper instrument. But above 1 or 1.5 diopter, choose a toric IOL. In toric IOL, the marking should be done manually. It can be quite accurate. Markerless systems are more welcome. Surgical pulse, incision, CCC, IOL marking. The incision should be as square as possible, ideally temporal 2.2 millimeters. So you can get a marking. I have my own marker that's designed that gives you a 1.25 millimeter mark. So you make a groove. You can see the mark beautifully on the clear cornea. Make a groove at the limbus. Enter. Move in. Dip in at that point. So you're guaranteed to get a perfect incision day in and day out. The CCC should be central, ideally sized, particularly if you're using a toric IOL to avoid any kind of rotation. So how do we get that? You can have a marker for that also. It's a 5 to 5.5 millimeter mark made on the cornea, followed by, of course, I use a soft shell technique, 2 viscoelastics that really makes the cornea very happy the next day. So you can see that marking that you made on the cornea, it's quite visible. You can use that as a template to make a perfectly positioned, perfect rhexis. So that again helps you in getting a perfectly centered. Now we have this whole surgery here depicted. A central mark. This is a double mark, 5 and 5.5. So you know where to choose. Make the incisions. The rhexis, you can use the marking that I made on the cornea, or you can use the markerless system. Both of them work equally well. So you get a perfect rhexis. Let's skip the surgery part. That's just routine. Now you have a perfectly centered rhexis. This patient is getting a toric IOL. Believe me, manual markings are as accurate if you do perfectly thin, long marks, not smudge. But if you have markerless systems, it makes the accuracy far, far better. Once you have the lens in position, switch on the marker, take out the viscoelastic from behind the lens, orient the lens perfectly, and your results are good. So now we'll come back to the summary. So target emetropia is not very difficult to achieve. You have to pay attention to biometry. Biometry means getting everything right. It's not just getting the axial length right. Actually, that's the least important. Make sure that you get perfect care readings. The cornea should be undisturbed. No drops should have been put. If the patient was using any kind of a contact lens, should have been discontinued a couple of days back. Do not do even non-contact tonometry before you do your keratometry. Remember that it's an extremely important point. Just the tape-off can make a difference. Once the biometry is accurate, manual biometers are as accurate as the most advanced IOL Master 700. But of course, in a difficult situation, particularly when you want the posterior K and you want the true K, all the newer instruments do have a role to play. We need to know these days the anterior chamber depth. We need to know the lens thickness and the white to white. All of these can be read off, even ultrasound biometer. Of course, if you have access to a step source biometry, nothing like it. It gives you that edge, especially in a difficult situation such as post-LASIK, post-RK, or a keratoconus patient. Having done that, choose the best formula. The best formula would keep changing on a daily basis. But for today, I would advise everyone to choose Barrett 2 Universal Toric. Why Toric? When you put in all the calculations, sometimes a K value tells that the person's toricity, astigmatism is only 0.5 or 0.75, but the true K or the posterior K will change, and you'll find a 1.5 astigmatism is present. So Barrett Universal 2 will tell you whether a given patient needs a toric or needs a non-toric lens. So calculate everybody as a toric patient and then decide. Yes, you can do LRIs if you're going to have an astigmatism of less than 0.75 or 1. Anything above that, put a toric lens in. Choose the appropriate lens for the patient depending upon the corneal astigmatism, depending on the axial length, depending on the type of personality of the patient's lifestyle, the needs, as well as if you can find out the corneal aberrations. Higher order aberrations are high, avoid lenses like multifocal lenses. If everything else is fine, the proper choice of lens would be very important. And meticulous surgical technique, as I pointed out, it's extremely important to do an incision that is astigmatically neutral. So it should be temporal, as limbal as possible, as square as possible. You have to have a properly centered capsulorhexis that would prevent the shift of the lens forward or backward, or rotation of the lens in case of a toric lens. So getting a perfect CCC is also very important. So with all of these steps, it's going to be rather easy to get a target emmetropia. Most of us can get within plus or minus 1, but we should aim to get well within plus or minus 0.5. Actually, the golden rule would be to get to plus or minus 0.25, which is well within our reach today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arun Mozivarman, for your excellent talk. May I now call upon Dr. Meena Chakravarti. Dr. Meena, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so she will be talking about an ode to the ILM, the role of ILM in medical and surgical diseases of the retina. Dr. Meena, you can share screen.
Am I audible? Is my screen visible?
Yes, yes. Just slideshow and get going. Yes.
Good evening. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Telangana Ophthalmic Society and Dr. Santosh Fanava for giving me this opportunity. I have titled my talk as an ode to the internal limiting membrane, the role of the internal limiting membrane in medical and surgical diseases of the retina as a bulk bread and butter of a retinal surgeon's practice and macular surgeries. If you look at the history of internal limiting membrane peeling, we started with an unintentional ILM peel, as in this case of Terson syndrome with a sub-ILM bleed, where after PVD induction, the internal limiting membrane is gently peeled off and the sub-ILM bleed is removed. From this situation of an unintentional ILM peel, we moved on to intentional internal limiting membrane peeling, when the story of the anomalous posterior vitreous detachment was clear to us. This is a situation in which three different processes, the process of liquefaction, syneresis, and weakening of the vitreoretinal interface adhesion, has to go hand in hand for the occurrence of a normal posterior vitreous detachment. In anomalous posterior vitreous detachment, there is a discord between these three processes, and we have the vitreous separating in only certain places from the retinal surface, and in certain places, the part of the vitreous would be attached to the retina. No talk on the internal limiting membrane is complete without coupling it with the vitreoretinal interface, since both of them go hand in hand. This is a young patient who came to me for an epiretinal membrane surgery, and on the table I found that what he had was a thickened vitreoschisis, which peeled up very easily, a thickened posterior hyaloid face, which peeled up very easily when I induced a PVD in him. So with that awareness of the occurrence of the anomalous posterior vitreous detachment, we became aware of a variety of conditions which occur in conjunction with the occurrence of an anomalous PVD, depending upon whether there is a vitreoschissis which occur at the macula, or we have a full thickness but partial PVD. When there is a vitreoschissis, there could be a premacular membrane, and depending upon whether the traction is centrifugal or centripetal, we have a macular hole or a macular pucker, and we may have a vitreomacular traction syndrome, vitreopapillopathies, or retinal tear and retinal detachment. Why is it necessary to peel the internal limiting membrane? It is necessary to peel the internal limiting membrane to optimize the results of our macular surgeries, because the ILM, if present, provides a scaffold for proliferation of epiretinal membrane, and the incidence of recurrence, the macular pathology, would be high. It also provides extracellular matrix for cellular migration and contraction. And in a patient who has a recalcitrant diabetic macular edema, deroofing of the thick and taut internal limiting membrane will ensure that there is regression of the macular edema. So here we have an adversary, and as the age-old saying says, it is better to know your adversary since you have to deal with him. So I will briefly look at the vitreoretinal interface, which is a three-layered structure. This very elegant scanning electron microscopic appearance of the vitreoretinal interface shows the posterior cortical vitreous, the interdigiting extracellular matrix called the vitreoretinal border region, and then you have the internal limiting membrane, which is actually the basement membrane of the foot process of the Muller cells, which are the scaffolds, which holds the retina in place and is responsible for the architecture of the retina. Like any other basement membrane, the internal limiting membrane is extremely thin and transparent and difficult to localize by conventional histology. We require a transparent electron microscopy to see this membrane, as seen in this elegant picture here, or immunocytochemical staining using antibodies to stain the type 4 collagen, which contributes a major part of the membrane. This thin, transparent structure is actually three-layered, and it has a lamina lucida, 2 layers of lamina lucida, sandwiching an air of lamina densa. There is a topographic variation in the human internal limiting membrane. And in this transparent electron microscopy, you say that the membrane is an undulating structure, and the undulations are maximum, where it fills up the crevices between the retinal cells at the posterior pole and thinner at the periphery. And most of our surgeries are right at the posterior pole, where you have a thicker internal limiting membrane with lot of undulation. And when we are doing an internal limiting membrane peel, we may end up peeling a small amount of the innermost layers of the retina. It is thickest in the paramacular area, thins down to a very small central thin area at the posterior pole, and again thins out again towards the periphery. So if you are going to harvest the internal limiting membrane in a failed macular hole surgery, where you're doing a macular plug or an inverted ILM flap, and you do not have enough internal limiting membrane over the posterior pole, you will find that it's very difficult to peel the membrane from outside the arcade, because the ILM there is extremely thin. The ILM also undergoes a variety of changes with aging, and luckily for us, since most of our macular pathologies are seen in the elderly population, you can see how thicker the ILM becomes with aging. Here you have right from the fetus to an 83-year-old man, and the difference in thickness is very, very significant. You have a thicker tissue to handle. So if you're performing a maculorhexis or peeling the internal limiting membrane, it will ensure that you don't damage the underlying retina significantly. Certain changes, pathological changes, also occur in the internal limiting membrane, especially in diabetic patients. The internal limiting membrane is much thicker. You can see the difference here between a non-diabetic and a diabetic patient. You can actually appreciate how much more thicker the internal limiting membrane is. And it could be because of excessive synthesis and incorporation of the normal type of collagen or fibronectin, which is a diabetic specific protein, which we don't see in the normal internal limiting membrane. Whatever it is, the thickness of the internal limiting membrane in diabetic patients with recalcitrant diabetic macular edema is very high. We started with peeling the internal limiting membrane without using any dye, a very difficult technique, and at times we pinched and traumatized the retina. Moved on to the use of triamcinolone acetonide, which just coats the surface of the internal limiting membrane, or trypan blue, or you can use a combination of dyes or lutein-based dyes having lutein and zeaxanthin, which will ensure that which have antioxidant property and ensure that the endo-illuminator does not cause photochemical damage to the retina. We moved on to the use of dyes which specifically stain the internal limiting membrane without staining the surface epiretinal membrane. This is called the negative staining technique, and it made our surgical technique much easier. If you started to peel the membrane from away from the area of the epiretinal membrane, we could peel the entire thing as a single piece, which is called a double peel technique. The internal limiting membrane could be peeled by staining using a dye which has to be retained on the surface of the retina, which is called the incubation period or the incubation time of the internal limiting membrane. And by making the dye heavier by the addition of dextrose or polyethylene glycol, it sinks back onto the surface of the retina, stays there for a sufficient period of time, making our peeling easier. We could even double stain using two dyes, one to stain the epiretinal membrane and the second one to stain the internal limiting membrane, so that both the membranes could be peeled simultaneously. There are studies to show that whatever is the type of dye that we use, there is not much difference in the toxicity that occurs in the macula, except an indocyanine green of higher concentration was used when there was photochemical damage to the retina. Peeling could be either partial or complete. A partially peeled internal limiting membrane stays as a single sheet, while a completely peeled membrane scrolls. So we are peeling the internal limiting membrane for a variety of disorders. The first disorder that we'll take into account is the macular hole surgery, where with and without peel, you can see that there's a significant difference in the hole closure and the hole reopening rate. We started initially by using a technique called the maculorhexis, where after PVD induction and removing of all the posterior cortical vitreous, we performed a maculorhexis using a blunt spatula, just like how the cataract surgeon does capsulorhexis. And the membrane was peeled in toto and removed from the eye. Subsequently evolved the techniques of an inverted internal limiting membrane flap or the macular plug technique, and I will demonstrate to you an elegant technique which we popularized from our center, which is published in the retina. Here, the macular plug is formed by three layers. The first layer is the autologous gluconated blood harvested from the patient's cubital vein. The second layer is the inverted internal limiting membrane, which is stuffed into the well of the hole. And the third layer is again another layer of autologous gluconated blood, and which we have a kind of plug closing the macular hole. The surgery is performed without fluid air exchange or air tamponade or postoperative positioning, which is a great disadvantage to the patient. And in this situation, we can use the same autologous gluconated blood to induce a posterior vitreous detachment and peel the internal limiting membrane without resorting to the use of any dye. After inducing a PVD, here I am peeling the internal limiting membrane after the stain with the autologous gluconated blood that I have used for inducing a posterior vitreous detachment. The membrane is peeled from the retinal surface, and you can see that the well of the hole has the first layer of the autologous plug that I'm going to make. It is filled with the patient's blood. The second layer is the inverted ILM. After peeling the inverted ILM and seeing to it that it is attached to the edges of the macular hole, I stuff it into the hole and then layer it over with again another layer of autologous gluconated blood. By the first or the second week after surgery, it ensures that there is hole closure. This we published in Retina in 2017, and I also received an award from the American Academy for the Best of the Show Video Award for this technique. If you look at epiretinal membrane surgery, we are dealing with a variety of situations where we may have a maculoschisis, you may have 2 or 3 layers of vitreous sitting on the surface of the macula. There is epimacular membrane proliferation and also internal limiting membrane. This is one such situation where you can see the vitreous schisis is being separated and completely peeled off the retinal surface, followed by staining and peeling of the internal limiting membrane. Same thing in this patient here, where the epiretinal membrane is peeled first, followed by peeling of the internal limiting membrane. The recurrence rate when we combine the surgery with ILM peel is very, very minimal. There's hardly any recurrence. However, peeling of a large area of internal limiting membrane produces an increase in retinal thickness in the immediate postoperative period. And as we follow the patient, you can see that the peripapillary retina as well as the macular RNFL, there is thinning on the temporal side, which does not translate into a visual defect in the patient. For diabetic macular edema, the deroofing of the membrane has to be carried out. This is 2 eyes of the same patient who had significant macular pathology. If you can see how thick and taut the how much hard exudation is there in the macula. He has undergone multiple procedures, multiple intravitreal injections, lasers with no results, and peeling of the internal limiting membrane. Usually in piecemeal peeling of the internal limiting membrane is necessary. So this is the appearance of the patient 2 years down the line. You have a clear macula. And the dye that we use for peeling causes some amount of photochemical damage, which is significant with ICG. And this can be avoided by reducing the incubation period, using an ICG of a higher osmolarity, and reducing the concentration of the ICG that we use. Some multifocal foveal ERG as well as microperimetry have not shown a significant damage. And when we are peeling the internal limiting membrane, you also peel a small amount, the amount of the retina from the surface. This is significant with diabetic macular edema and minimal with the macular hole. One of the complications is the occurrence of spontaneous hole in the parafoveal area. This is a Swiss cheese macula. And what we are removing is actually the retinal scaffold, and the retina has a tendency to collapse in these areas. And even after a traumatic internal limiting membrane peel, we see this complication. Another complication is the Donefeld, or the dissociated optic nerve fiber layer seen, which is a situation that can resolve on its own. And swelling of the arcuate nerve fiber layer, which is also seen in some patients, which again resolves on its own. Whatever is it, internal limiting membrane peel is a widely recognized technique used routinely in all our macular pathologies. A technique which requires additional use of intraoperative agents and additional investment of your surgical time. There are a few insignificant complications associated with this, but none of the studies, nor our own personal experience, have shown that it is associated with any significant adverse visual results, while we are able to significantly reduce the incidence of recurrence of the pathology. I thank you very much for your kind hearing. Dr. Mathur, I'm done.
Anyway, thank you, Dr. Meena, for a very, very excellent presentation that you've given. And I'm sure everybody's appreciated it, though everybody is a bit far away from the retina, most of us. But still, I'm sure we've appreciated the wonderful work that you've been doing. Thank you. Anybody else to speak?
I think Dr. Raju is ready.
Dr. Raju, are you ready? Dr. Raju?
And Dr. Jyotirmay Biswas is also there.
Dr. Biswas, are you ready? We'll take you on next. Yeah.
Are you able to hear me? But I'm not able to share my screen. Let me just try once more.
Okay, I'll request Dr. Biswas to please go ahead and complete his talk. Yes, Dr. Biswas.
No, it is not possible. Pradeep sir, I'm not able to do that. Something wrong with my computer.
Okay. Shall I give you another 5 minutes till Dr. Biswas speaks? Please try once more.
I'll have a last try.
Right. Thank you.
Is there anyone else before me?
Yes, Dr. Biswas is speaking now. The slides have come up.
Let him finish. In the meantime, let me try to do something with this one. I think it's a major problem because whenever I try to minimize my screen now, it just goes away. Then I have to do everything from the beginning.
Okay. Please try once more. We have some more time and request Dr. Biswas to go ahead.
Another occasion.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
My slides are seen. And am
Yes,
I
sir.
audible?
Yes,
sir. Yes, sir.
Slides are always
So
there.
I like to convey my regards to Dr. Pradeep Sharu, Dr. Nandakishore, and Dr. Manoj Mathur. And I really feel very humble to talk among the stalwarts in ophthalmology in India. And I like to thank Dr. Santosh for giving me this opportunity. What I am going to talk about my research in uveitis, my journey and way forward. This is my humble experience which I like to share. It was 1985. I joined as a consultant finishing my vitreoretinal fellowship. I was given a research project by Dr. Badrinath, ocular morbidity in active systemic tuberculosis. Questions we asked that what is the ocular morbidity in active systemic tuberculosis? What are the various types of ocular tuberculosis seen? Is Eales disease seen in active systemic tuberculosis? We went to a tuberculosis research center in Madras and made a makeshift ophthalmology clinic. And I studied 1,005 patients over a year Ocular morbidity in active systemic tuberculosis was only 1.39%, and most common was healed focal choroiditis, and no case of Eales disease was seen. And this was a photograph of a miliary tubercle of the choroid. This photo was taken 36 years back. Then I did extensive manual search of the literature, and I found my observation was correct. This was published in Ocular Morbidity in Patients with Active Systemic Tuberculosis in International Ophthalmology. I then got interested and started looking into the ocular tuberculosis in pathology lab registry. And there are only 5 cases of unequivocal intraocular tuberculosis was seen where bugs were observed. This was intraocular tuberculosis, clinical pathological study of 5 cases. This includes subretinal abscess of 2 cases, granulomatous uveitis with scleral perforation, exudative mass in the anterior chamber, choroidal mass with pan-uveitis 1 case each. This was published in the Retina Journal. This was an example of a case of a subretinal abscess who was treated with antitubercular treatment at the steroid. Unfortunately, the patient went to pan-ophthalmologist, and the eviscerated tissues showed myriads of acid-fast bacilli in the subretinal space. I was interested in the Eales disease. We used to see a lot of patients of Eales disease. 1 in every 135 patients in Shankar Nethralaya comprised of Eales disease cases. What was the cause of Eales disease? There was a presumption that this is due to the tuberculosis. I asked the question, is there MTB in their vitreous fluid, Mycobacterium tuberculosis? We got the vitreous fluid epiretinal membrane from the Eales disease patient who are undergoing vitreoretinal surgery. We did smear, culture, and polymerase chain reaction. I spent time with Professor Madhavan, Director of Microbiology Department of Shankar Nethralaya, and we did the PCR results of the vitreous specimens. About 50% of the patients contain Mycobacterium tuberculosis DNA. Culture was negative for MTB in all cases. This was published in British Journal of Ophthalmology. Then we studied the polymerase chain reaction of Mycobacterium tuberculosis DNA in the epiretinal membrane of Eales disease, which was published in Investigative Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences. We found Mycobacterium tuberculosis DNA was present in 47% of the ERM in Eales disease. And we could see that there was a agarose gel photograph showing Mycobacterium tuberculosis DNA amplified product. We concluded that the cell-mediated immunologic reaction triggered by sequestered Mycobacterium tuberculosis antigen plays an important role in pathogenesis of Eales disease. We were fortunate to get an eyeball of a painful blind eye of an Eales disease patient, and in fact, we could demonstrate the Mycobacterium tuberculosis DNA in the intraocular tissue. We compiled our data and gone through the 300 full-text articles, worked for a year, and wrote a major review in Survey of Ophthalmology, which is often quoted in the literature regarding Eales disease. We did the long-term outcome of a large cohort of patients with Eales disease comprising of 898 eyes of 500 patients with a follow-up period of 10 to 25 years with mean follow-up of 15.8 years. We found bilaterality in 81% of the cases and acute stage response to the oral steroid very well, and laser treatment in the proliferative stage had got better prognosis. And recurrence was not uncommon. In fact, 52% patients had 5 or less recurrences in 10 years span. We worked in the ocular lesions in AIDS in India, and were the first to report ocular lesions in 2 cases in India. And we also followed these cases, patients, and when you had 100 consecutive patients, we published in American Journal of Ophthalmology, where we showed that the 40% patients had 1 or more ocular lesions. We also studied the ocular tuberculosis in acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and this was published in American Journal of Ophthalmology, and we found ocular tuberculosis is comprised of 4.8% cases, starting from the conjunctiva tuberculoma to the tubercle in the choroid, subretinal abscess, panophthalmitis. I had a humble beginning in the epidemiology of uveitis. I used to record meticulously all uveitis cases by hand, writing by hand in a register. I analyzed it over after a year, and presented as a free paper in the All India Ophthalmological Society meeting, got the feedback, and wrote it up as a pattern of uveitis in India. And this was one of the first publication of pattern of uveitis in India. It's important to the keep tracking of the patients, which you see. We found that the anterior uveitis is the most common uveitic entity, followed by the posterior uveitis, then intermediate uveitis, and finally pan-uveitis. We followed these patients, and 23 years after my recording of the uveitis patients, we found etiology determined in more number of cases, 66% versus 41% in 23 years back. Intermediate uveitis became the second most common uveitic entity than posterior uveitis, and most common cause of posterior uveitis changed from toxoplasmosis to tuberculosis. And we started seeing viral retinitis more commonly, about 6.8%. What I learned that following your data, you can find very good information which can be used to you as well as the ophthalmic community in the country. We had a case of ocular malaria. While routine glossing of the donor eyeball, I saw retinal hemorrhages in the eyeball and found that the patient was suffering from malaria. I got the autopsy eyes and could find the malaria parasite within choroidal blood vessels after spending hours through the microscope one. I felt that this is the photograph of the hemorrhage in the eye, and you can see the actual malaria parasite within the choroidal blood vessels. What I feel is that when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. We had a parasite in the eye, that is Nephostoma spinogerum. So many of us have seen the parasite, but I took it further up, and did the scanning electron microscopy pathologic study and shown that the documentations of the parasite within the vitreous cavity and the track which he has made by the parasite with also the intraocular inflammation which is caused. We did the scanning electron microscopy and as well as the histopathologic study of the parasite. My turning point in my academic career is a fellowship in ophthalmic pathology in Doheny Institute in Ophthalmology under Professor Narsingh Rao. And what I have learned from him, which I applied in my Indian context, that various biopsy pathology of uveitis from various specimens of which we can got included anterior chamber fluid, vitreous fluid, as well as the fine needle aspiration biopsy, and could show that there is a important clinical pathological correlation can be made in retinoblast, pseudohypopia and retinoblastoma, lens-induced uveitis, primary intraocular lymphoma. This was not possible without the help of my mentor, beloved chief, Dr. S.S. Badrinath, and my other mentor, Professor Narsingh Rao, Doheny Institute, USA, who is basically from Hyderabad, and without many of my postgraduate fellows and colleagues which have helped me, and also my teammates in UVA department. And I'll never forget our photographer, Mr. S.P. Govindarajan, who has helped me taking photographs of these clinical cases. Last but not the least, my wife. Actually, he has helped me to write my first international publications, primary amyloidosis of the vitreous, light microscopy and ultrastructural study. I wrote 7 pages. Reviewer asked me to make it 1 page. I simply could not do it. I was so attached to it. My wife cut it up and made it 1 page, and that's publications from the first international one. Now, I like to share my thoughts on publication in peer-reviewed journals. So it is the adage that publish or perish. I say publish and prosper. A scientific work, no matter how spectacular findings are, is not complete until it is published. The scientist must not only do research, but also must write up the research works to communicate with others. So what is required is enthusiasm, persistence, strong commitment, and last but not the least, passion for it. So why we should do the publication? What is in it for you? It's aged in history, persists forever, and publication is the gold standard. Learning from the literature review, learning from the review process by your peers, knowledge gets crystallized. So I started with the baby state, first wrote in the House Journal, Netralaya Insight, then in Tamil Nadu Ophthalmic Journal, and still learning the art of scientific writing even after few PubMed index publications. This is the natural insight where my first publication came. And then with the experience, I could write some tips and suggestions in writing a research paper, which was published in Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. What I look forward is that I wanted to share with you. What I'm doing now is swept source optical coherence tomography in retinal vasculitis and choroiditis, metabolic biomarkers in uveitis, metagenomic deep sequencing in intraocular fluid in TB uveitis, and new biologics in uveitis. This is the work which I have done in the, this is a swept source OCTA in an Eales disease patient showing elegantly retinal neovascularization. And this is the multifocal choroiditis. You can see the flow void areas in SS-OCTA with and that which with the treatment, the flow void areas disappear. So way forward, I feel that is the national and international collaborative research we need. We need to analyze the big data. We need to apply artificial intelligence. Proteomics in the uveitis, metabolic biomarkers will come in the big way. New imaging technique will show the path and will analyze the details of pathogenesis. Next generation sequencing will unravel many pathology of the uveitis. Targeted and local therapy will be the new way of treatment. So artificial intelligence and deep learning has come in ophthalmology and will touch the uveitis also. We did the various biomarkers will come. We did the MYD88L265 mutations in intraocular lymphoma, which has got sensitivity as 88.9% and specificity of 91.6%. We're also trying to search the biomarkers in uveitis, serum metabolic profiling in patients with non-infectious uveitis. Some of us are doing protein biomarkers in uveitis, and then animal models of ocular tuberculosis can unravel the pathogenesis and help in the diagnosis and treatment of uveitis. So metagenomic deep sequencing can find the pathogens, those both common and rare pathogens in uveitis, and will show the new pathway of diagnosis and treatment. What we feel that revising the diagnosis of idiopathic uveitis more and more is possible with the peripheral blood transcriptomics and whole exome sequencing in patients with uveitis in the posterior segment. I like to end up with a quotation which from T.X. Huxley, which says the known is finite, the unknown is infinite. Intellectually, we stand on an islet in the midst of ocean of inexplicability. Our business in every generation is to reclaim a little more land. What I've tried in the 3 decades of research is to reclaim a little more land. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Biswas. Now I would like to invite Dr. Pradeep Swarup to give his thoughts and comments about the session. Is Dr. Raju ready? Dr. Raju? Yeah.
Dr. Raju is logged up, I think, sir.
Okay, he's not able to present. So I think with that we conclude the session. And before concluding, I would like Dr. Pradeep Swarup to give his thoughts, chairperson of the session.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all the speakers for doing an excellent job. And this session was particularly unique. This session was particularly unique that we had a wide variety of subjects discussed, right from how to develop a practice, how to calculate IOL power calculation, including some unique surgeries which are performed and shown by the various speakers. And there's no doubt that the top 4 or 5 people who've spoken today are somebody we all look up to in spite of our age. And they have been real achievers and will contribute to a great extent in the development of ophthalmology in India. Thank you, Manoj.
Yeah. I think, Sneha, you can wind up the session. We reconvene at 6:30. Thank you from my side. Thank you from Dr. Nankishore, Dr. Swarup, all the 3 DIAS people.
The
chairpersons and the moderator. So, thank you from all of us, and thanks to all the speakers.
And so thanks to you, sir, for dynamically being there and handling it.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Constantly the 6 hours, the 5 hours gap, I think, because he has been moderating both the sessions very effectively, sir.
Right.
So wonderful, and really hats off to you.
We're working behind the scenes with Sneha and Rolika to manage time management. Yeah. So it's been a good session, or in fact sessions. So we can all log out now and reconvene sharp at 6:30 for the orations.
Right.
Wonderful, wonderful, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Biswal.
sir.